That was the inquiry from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho here on CBC Radio 1.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on another cold morning as we get into January here. And our high today, though, is going to be -8. Thanks so much for joining us. You might be listening on the radio, as mentioned, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, or watching on YouTube this morning. Well, at 3 minutes to 6 a.m., let's say good morning to our team. In today, in our control room, Mr. Kevin Nipatebo. Hello, Kev. Kev waving hello if you're watching the show. And Kevin is our YouTube producer. Good morning to May McKillop. May is going to be covering the commute on air, and May is directing this morning, filling in for Corey. Good morning to Abby Adeyemi, who is our technical producer on the program, and we'll hear Abby giving a more fuller look at the forecast, of course, through the program. Heather Wells is in also today, and she's here with our news headlines, and we have serious news that we're all going to be talking about, and we have a lot about on the show as well. Heather, what's been going on?
Good morning. Yes. Well, investigators at the Health Sciences Centre are combing over notes and video surveillance to determine why a middle-aged man died in the emergency room early yesterday. The man arrived by ambulance. He was assessed as low acuity. After 8 hours, staff noticed his condition had worsened. They rushed him to a resuscitation bed, at which point he had no pulse. We're going to hear from the hospital's chief operating officer coming up. A Winnipeg City Councillor worries about the number of vacant building fires in the inner city. Ross Eady represents people living in Minarski, including North Point Douglas. Most recently, the vacant Holy Ascension Greek Orthodox Church on Euclid was damaged by fire on Monday night. We're going to hear from him. We'll also hear from people who live in the area coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, obviously, that story about the death in Winnipeg's HSC emergency room, emergency department has a lot of people in our community thinking about the death of Brian Sinclair. And so we are going to talk this morning about patient safety overall, and we're going to talk to a patient safety advocate in the context of this case. So we, as Heather mentioned, we don't have much more detail than what was shared in the news, but we'll have that interview coming up for you in the second hour of the program. So stay tuned for that. Also, we are going to keep our series going on Canada's low birth rate, and today we're going to talk to a group that is not in the stat.
Q.
I'm Talia Schlanger sitting in for Tom Power. Something big happens to an artist's life when their music is featured in an Apple commercial. The duo Sophie Tucker will tell you what it's like having over 1 billion people hear their song. Plus, you'll hear music from their new record, Bread.
Q. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Liberal MPs are gathering today in Ottawa with one objective in mind: finding a new leader.
Do you have a favorite candidate in mind?
People haven't even declared yet.
So I do have a favorite person, but I let them come out and declare first.
I think that Christopher Phelan would be an amazing candidate for a new leader.
People like Christy Clark from BC and others, I think could really rebuild the party.
Rebuilding the party will be a heavy lift, but there are multiple people expected to bid on the job. Janice McGregor is in our parliamentary bureau. And Janice, what are the factors people might consider if they want to enter this race?
Well, let's start with the ministers who are shouldering a big load right now. Think of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc or Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly. If Canada finds itself in a tariff war in 2 weeks' time, these are the ministers leading the departments at the heart of that fight. Can you do that while also mounting a national leadership campaign? Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne, who's also deeply engaged in cross-border conversations right now, admitted on Power and Politics yesterday that he's grappling with this.
Priority number one is protecting Canada. Right. The second thing is the Liberal Party of Canada in the leadership race. And thirdly is, where am I going to be in all that?
Does the Liberal Party need to put a new voice in front of voters, someone that doesn't carry baggage from the government's time in office? Or, given the urgent timelines here, will it be more important to pick a leader that's already got a seat in the House, that can lead from day one? Because they can't have both, nor can they afford a bitter or divisive leadership race when they're at historic lows in the polls. Liberal Party spokesperson Parker Lund told CBC News yesterday that the National Board of the Liberal Party is having formal and informal meetings all this week. Establishing the rules for the leadership race, though, apparently is going to take some time. For a contest that may need to play out over a few weeks, not months, what they decide on entry fees, fundraising rules, recruiting deadlines, voting procedures may determine who's really in a position to mount a serious campaign.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. Donald Trump is once again musing about possibly acquiring Canada when he re-enters the White House.
Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line.
The U.S. president-elect says he will consider using economic force to make Canada the 51st state. Trump has made similar statements about Greenland and the Panama Canal. Let's bring in Richard Madden from Washington. And Richard, what is the latest reaction to Trump's comments?
Yeah, there's been plenty. Some questioning if he's teasing or if he's serious. But leaders of Panama, Denmark, that owns Greenland, and of course Canada, are all pushing back on Trump's proposed land grab. In fact, last night, Ontario Premier Doug Ford went on one of Trump's favorite channels, Fox News, and made the case. Take a listen.
I get it. You know, President-elect Trump is a real estate tycoon. He's made billions. But that property's not for sale. As simple as that.
Now, for weeks, Trump has been trolling Canada by calling it the 51st state, calling Prime Minister Justin Trudeau governor, and has been posting memes showing a map of the U.S. enveloping Canada. So I suspect we're going to hear a lot more saber-rattling from Trump in the weeks ahead.
And what are U.S. lawmakers saying about Trump's vision?
Yeah, lawmakers are pointing out that both Canada and Denmark, that owns Greenland, are part of NATO. So Trump's unlikely annexation of these countries would invoke Article 5, which would require the U.S. to basically fight against themselves. It's an implausible situation. Democratic Congressman Jim Hines of Connecticut says it's just not going to happen.
What we're talking about here are things that are never going to happen. They're shiny things. They're little bits of tin foil and fireworks designed to distract us from the fact that the president-elect is going to completely fail to deliver.
Now, other lawmakers believe this is a legacy issue for Trump. Expanding America's territory would be historic for any president. So we'll see how far Trump goes with this. He hasn't even been sworn in yet, but he's once again captured attention around the world.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
You bet.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Winds whip up the flames in Pasadena, California. 3 major wildfires are burning in the Los Angeles area, and the Santa Ana winds are making it impossible for firefighters to get the flames under control. Thousands of people have been forced to leave their communities, some at a moment's notice. This man works at a seniors facility in Pasadena where residents had to be carried to safety.
It's tough. It's tough. They can't get up. They're stuck on the wheelchairs. We got to lift them up, put them in the vans, and then take the wheelchairs at the same time. So we got to get everybody out of here.
Another fire is burning through the Pacific Palisades area. It is home to several celebrities. CATL is the world's biggest battery maker. It's based in China. And now the Pentagon has put it on its list of companies linked to the Chinese military. As Lisa Xing reports, tension is rising over technology and trade between China and the U.S.
This can, of course, be seen as a bit of an escalation.
Matt Geraci with DC-based think tank Atlantic Council says it's another wrinkle in U.S.-China relations. The U.S. Department of Defense adding Chinese tech giant Tencent and the world's largest battery maker, CATL, to a list of companies it says work with China's military.
The designation, of course, also illustrates the complexities of a push to more broadly decouple the United States from China.
Both Tencent and CATL call the move a mistake, coming at a time when relations are increasingly strained as incoming U.S. President Donald Trump threatens to levy 60% tariffs on all imports from China, and as they are embroiled in a tech rivalry in the electric vehicle industry. China firmly opposes the U.S. creating discriminatory lists under various pretexts, said Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun. The designation could affect U.S. firms working with these companies. CATL currently supplies batteries to car makers including Tesla, and it's working with Ford on making those batteries at a plant in Michigan.
This action may give a company like Ford a bit more pause on how or whether to proceed with its budding partnership.
Geraci says while this action primarily risks a company's reputation, it could open the door to an outright ban. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Italian journalist Cecilia Sala is on her way back home after 3 weeks in an Iranian prison. The 29-year-old reporter was detained in Tehran on December 19th, just 3 days after Italian police arrested an Iranian engineer on a U.S. warrant. Commentators suggested Sala was being held as a bargaining chip to ensure the engineer's release. Italian officials say Sala's freedom required intensive diplomatic effort. Starting this year, Canada is cutting the number of new permanent residents. The initial target was to admit 500,000 people in 2025, in part to help labor shortages. But in a survey conducted by CBC, nearly 2/5 of respondents say they're not working in their field of expertise. Vanessa Lee has been looking at the struggles of internationally trained doctors.
I was practicing in the Dominican Republic for 3 years.
Like other international medical graduates, Ismenda Ramirez has spent thousands of dollars to write and pass Canadian medical exams. But for 2 years, she has been waiting for a residency, a crucial stage where doctors gain hands-on experience in hospitals and clinics. During this time, she has worked at McDonald's and is currently a medical assistant.
We are willing to work hard and to do what it takes just to get to our final goal.
Advocates say more funding and residency spots are needed. The vast majority of placements go to graduates from Canadian medical schools. Last year, just over 670 international medical graduates were successful, but about 930 didn't get a position. Stephanie Price is with the Federation of Medical Regulatory Authorities of Canada.
In order to put more people into a residency program, you have to have more people there to be the mentors. And so I think that is a significant bottleneck.
The path to becoming a doctor in Canada is not simple. Not only can qualifications vary depending on country of origin, all 13 provinces and territories have separate licensing requirements. Dr. Joss Reimer.
And even me as the president of the Canadian Medical Association, I find it challenging to understand what the different options are and how they work.
Roughly 6.5 million Canadians don't have a family doctor. Across the country, there are thousands of internationally trained physicians who could bring down that number, but aren't able to work in their field. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Toronto.
And you can read more about the survey and our methodology at cbcnews.ca/Welcome to Canada. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, welcome to your Tuesday morning, everyone. Whoops, Wednesday morning, everyone. Apparently, I need more coffee. Thanks for joining us on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and YouTube. I even thought about that. How sad is that? In Winnipeg today, cold, but our daytime high is not too bad. So we're going to get into the forecast in a moment. As usual, get you set up for your day. This hour on the program, if you still have a real holiday tree hanging around and you want to get rid of, we're going to tell you about some goats that will be happy to get their hooves on it, so stay tuned for that. Also, a science-based warning says that Canada could see more severe wildfires days unless governments take action to clear the dry fuels in forests. We're going to have a conversation about this new warning, and also we're going to have a conversation about how the prorogation of Parliament could affect any action on this file. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells, who has quite serious news in our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg man who recently waited hours for care in an emergency room isn't surprised to hear a man died early yesterday while waiting at the Health Sciences Center's ER. Jeff Willison says that could have been him. The 57-year-old says he also recently took an ambulance to a different hospital after experiencing chest pains. He, too, waited hours in the St. Boniface ER before being moved to the waiting room. He waited hours there and in the end left without seeing a doctor. He worries others will face the same challenges when they need help the most. The cost of insuring your car in Manitoba is about to go up an average of $51 a year. The Public Utilities Board has ordered Manitoba Public Insurance to raise its basic rates by 5.7%. We'll hear more and some reaction to that coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
Heather, I'm just reflecting on your top story this morning of the death of the man in the ER department. It's so interesting how your mind just immediately goes to Brian Sinclair and thinks about 16 years ago. And,
Exactly.
we just remind ourselves of all the changes that were supposed to, be put in place, and many have been put in place to help with patient safety. So lots of questions this morning, probably more questions than answers at this point. I know that you've reported, what we have, but still a lot of things we don't know, right?
Absolutely. And they're going to be they're already going over their notes and video surveillance just to find out what happened. And you're right about the comparison with Brian Sinclair. So many apparent similarities.
I know that when Brian Sinclair died, we had the show live out on Main Street. I remember Brian Postal at the time was the person that was in charge, and he was there and talking about it. And it was this sort of collective grief of the community as well, that something like this could happen. So a lot of things that we'll have to sort through. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thanks to the news department as well. I know that there's been a lot of work done on that story. Please read what we do know, cbc.ca/Manitoba, in addition to what Heather brings to us this morning. We have a patient safety advocate on our show later. It is right now 6:13, and let's get into what's happening with our team. And Abby Adeyemi is in this morning. Hi there.
Good morning.
How was your drive in?
Stepped out this morning, noticed some ice crystals, and then that moment you want to just get into the car and drive off, and then you have to wait for the windshield to defrost.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to wake up my neighbors scraping the thing this morning. I'm just going to sit in there and just chill.
Yeah.
And I was chilling.
So what's your deal? Do you bring a blanket? I know I feel spoiled with a garage. I didn't have a garage for my whole adult life until like a handful of years ago. But when I used to do that in the early hours, I had a whole system. Like I had a blanket on my lap and I had something around my shoulders.
I just had to dip my hands in my pocket.
Oh, we've got to get you those. We've got to get you heated mitts or something.
I kind of have some, but I just refuse not to grab them whenever I'm getting into the car, because I'm going to lose it. It's the same way I lose umbrellas, I lose gloves and mitts.
Okay, you're that guy.
So I'm that guy.
Okay, you're that guy. The forecast today, though, later today is going to warm up a little bit, right?
Yeah, more like a double C today, cold and cloudy. Temperatures still well below freezing. Wind chills will make it feel much colder across board. For Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, we're looking at mostly cloudy conditions at this time with temperatures around -16. And today, these mainly cloudy conditions will stay with us. We'll notice some light breeze from the south. Temperatures, we do warm up, Marcy, to -8. I've not really seen this number in a long time. So we warm up to -8, but the wind chill is still going to make it feel cold around the -28 this morning. So don't let that fool you. There's still a risk of frostbite, and these cloudy conditions will stay into tonight. For Brandon, we're seeing misty conditions. So if you're driving out there, take it easy on the highway. We have these misty conditions that will be tapering off later. Temperatures around -12, light snow expected. Parkland region will see cloudy conditions, similar in the South Interlake region. And then for Churchill, it is chilly up there, and I'll call it a frigid condition up in Churchill.
All right, thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
May McKillop is in with the actual commute. I saw you nodding when he was mentioning mist out around west.
Yeah, I'm noticing just west of Brandon along Highway number 1. There's some partly covered conditions and some misty as well. Looking on Highway 10 through Riding Mountain National Park up to Dauphin, and all the way into Minnedosa and along Highway 45 to Neepawa. There's some partly covered conditions and some reduced visibility. 511 if you're wanting to see any highway conditions, and give us a call of anything on the commute throughout the show today. 204-788-3093.
Well, now that the holidays are behind us, some of you may still have the tree up or hanging around and maybe you want to get rid of it. If so, Aurora Farm is ready to take it. The trees are given to goats, and we're going to find out why. The farm's been collecting old Christmas trees for a lot of years. Louise May is the owner of Aurora Farm and up early and with us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
Why do goats like trees?
Well, you know what? They are actually forest browsers naturally. they would much prefer to eat what they could find and forage in a forest than a grassland animal. So they just love them, especially the more prickly, the better. So it's a natural fit for people wanting to let their Christmas trees go to a good cause.
So they munch on what part of the tree, or do they take the whole thing?
They really eat all the prickly needles. You know, you watch them with their soft mouth just chew on those branches. They love the bark. You know, they will, bite down right onto the bark and eat the whole bark off, all the little twigs. Really, they just leave kind of like a pencil core at the end of the day.
I'm having a hard time focusing on what you're saying because while we're talking, there's these images of the goats eating the Christmas trees going by on our YouTube stream, and they're so adorable.
They are indeed. And it's a nice time. A lot of people have come for years and make it their own little part of their own little Christmas ritual with their family, and come out and visit the goats and connect with the farm life.
Yeah, I bet. My favorite picture has a goat munching on a tree, and then in the background there's like a short farm fence, and you can see the sun presumably coming up. It might be going down, but just beautiful. How quickly can they make work of a full tree?
Well, I mean, we've got a fair little herd here, so, we like to keep throwing in a couple every day. But really, the trees will last us. We try to, have them last out through the whole next 2-3 months. So usually by March, we're, throwing the last trees in. And even if they're dry and getting browner, they will still eat them.
What do you do with any leftovers? I guess, does it benefit the farm in any other way?
Yeah, I usually have them, turned into mulch so that I can lay them on garden paths and so on.
How's the tree drop-off been going so far this year, Louise?
Oh, it's really so sweet. Like, people are just nice, just really in great moods to come and visit, and it's always nice to connect with people in the winter like that.
What does it do for their physical systems? Like, is it actually healthy for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So not only does it give them, a completely other food that they're excited about, and, in the middle of the winter and it's cold, we're always trying to boost their feed. But the trees, especially those pine trees, they have a component that is, they're tannins, and they have all these other components. But one of the things it does is it's a natural dewormer. And, the way everything's been going with livestock, you want to have as many natural options as possible, because especially with the dewormers, animals have been for many years now, starting to get resistant to them. So you want to, not have to use as many dewormers as possible is the goal.
Do they like all kinds of trees? I'm just curious, or is it mostly evergreens?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like in the spring, we'll feed them willow branches, and, they just love any kind of tree. So if they were in a forest, they would
That's what they'd be doing.
Browsing throughout the forest, getting all the different kinds.
Who's your fave, Louise? Do they have names?
Oh, I can't say that on the air. There would be a little rebellion. It's funny because people do connect individually, and it's always fun to watch all the people that are involved here at Aurora Farm connect with certain animals, and they reflect back to me saying, like, I just can't believe how much I love so and so. Like, why am I having this chemistry with this one animal? And so, yeah, we do. Of course, we do. I mean, for myself, every one of these goats was born here on the farm, and I assisted their birth, and they're all special to me. Some of them are a little more.
Oh, I think we just lost Louise there. I apologize. So we just had a problem with the phone line. Louise, if you're listening, thank you for this morning. And we appreciate having you on, telling us about your lovely goats, and also, of course, about the Christmas tree recycling. By the way, if you want to drop off your tree, Louise May, we've been talking to, the owner of Aurora Farm. It's in Winnipeg, St. Norbert area, of course. You can drop off your real Christmas tree on Saturdays or Sundays between 11 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And if you have more questions, you can always reach out.
The cold of winter melted by an array of floral artistry to warm your soul. Fleur de Ville Artiste comes to the Leaf at Assiniboine Park January 16th to 26th. Be dazzled by figurines decorated in flowery fashions, designed by Manitoba's vibrant art scene and blossoming floral talent. Fleur de Ville Artiste, proudly sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
6:22 a.m. You're with CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at the show on 89.3 FM. And a high of -8, as Abby's been mentioning, in Winnipeg today. Brandon, cloudy, chance of light snow, and a high of -4 today. And in Thompson, chance of flurries as well, and a high of -10. So much milder conditions. Don't be fooled. The wind chills are still going to get us, but the daytime highs are much improved over what we've had. Well, now is the time to prepare. That's according to the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs. This is after two things have happened. First, a new report in the journal Science that shows Canadian wildfire seasons are longer than before. Second, of course, the proroguing of Parliament until March 24th. Both are on the mind of my next guest. Ken McMullen is the president of the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs and the fire chief in Red Deer, Alberta. Good morning.
Good morning.
So why don't we start with the proroguing of Parliament, Ken? Why are you concerned about that?
Well, I think that what is most important to understand is over the same 90-day period that Parliament is prorogued, those are the same 90 days that my colleagues and I start preparing for the wildfire season of 2025. We know that better national coordination is needed. We have come a long way as an organization working with all parties of government to show the need of a national fire administration. But unfortunately, as close as we were, this proroguing of government does put us back into a pause stage.
Did you have hope on the horizon that anything actually would be passed, however, around the issues that you've raised in the needs of departments across the country?
As recently as 3 weeks ago, myself and 53 of my colleagues were in Ottawa, where we spent 2 days working with all the elected officials from all parties to once again provide the data and the very, very strong rationale for the need of a national fire administration. I felt very confident leaving Ottawa in the second week of December about the likelihood of this being created. So am I as optimistic today? No. Am I equally as concerned? Certainly. And I believe that we still need to have these conversations. Luckily, from what we understand, the House does not need to be sitting for this to be implemented. This is not a law as far as the creation of a national fire administration. So we're just going to continue to advocate and tell them that the need of this is now more than ever.
So you should not actually be affected by prorogation then?
That is our hope as far as literally getting this passed through government. We think that this could occur without the sitting of government.
Let's move briefly to the journal Science. We actually, I think, have spoken about it before. What does it tell us about wildfires in this country?
Yeah, thank you. And yes, I've been on your program before talking about climate change, talking about different reports. This particular article provides evidence that severe wildfire seasons are no longer an anomaly. They are no longer this term unprecedented, and that what we are likely to see in 2025 and in future years is both precedented and predictable. It tells us that there's significant work to do in wildfire preparation as it pertains to removing fire loads as per the principles of Fire Smart. And quite frankly, it just evidently shows that Canada isn't prepared.
I want to ask you about preparation down south, only because I can't help but thinking about California this morning. Of course, the images coming out of there, how quickly things, moved, the threats to LA. What are your thoughts? And are there ways that other systems are working better to respond to what is, an increasing challenge with fast-moving wildfires all over the world? Maybe it's not the states that you look to for the system. Maybe it's somewhere else. But are there places that are finding better solutions?
Well, we could spend the rest of the morning talking about this. And again, my thoughts go to all of those that are impacted by the California wildfires, including the first responders. I think there's a couple of things that I'll just highlight at the highest level. First of all, our colleagues in the United States have a far more robust interoperability. What I mean by that is the ability for firefighters from one state to assist in another state. And that is done through the coordination of the U.S. Fire Administration. And the coordination and the equipment and the resource personnel requests between one state is done far better than what we have here in Canada. So that's one of the advantages, is they've got the ability to take resources from across the states and put them where they need to put them. Now, when you talk about the reactionary as population, as citizens, as we watch this, there are a couple of things that I'll remind people that are listening to your program this morning, is that there are some things that we can do personally around preventing or at least reducing the risk of wildfire within our own properties. And that's this concept of fire smarting. And those people in California are looking around their properties right now saying, I wonder what I can remove. Can I remove deadfall? Can I remove the year's worth of wood stored up the side of my property? Can I do some things now that's going to reduce my risk of fire? Second of all, the unfortunate reality is, and as you're seeing, there's about 30,000 people on evacuation order or alert right now, which means that people have been told to leave or they've been told to stand by and prepare to leave on a moment's notice. As Canadians, are we prepared? Are you personally prepared for a 72-hour kit? Do you have all of your important documents ready to go? Do you have medication? Do you have your passport, whatever you think you might need? I think that those are good reminders as we turn on the news or we listen to this radio broadcast this morning. Are we prepared personally to react to these situations?
Ken, thank you very much for being on the program today. Appreciate it.
Thank you to your listeners. Please stay safe.
That's Ken McMullen, the president of the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs. He's also, by the way, the fire chief in Red Deer, Alberta.
Be an Iron Man and curl. No, not your hair. This is curling on the frozen ice of the Assiniboine River. Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is back February 7th to 9th. Form a team, embrace the winter with one hand, a rock with the other, and join the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
So I don't know about you, but in my circles, everyone's talking about President-elect Donald Trump yesterday saying he's willing to use, quote, economic force to absorb Canada into the United States. So we are going to talk about what is going on here and also what the response has been from our government. And that is coming up straight ahead on the program in our business news with Crystal Lee Ramlakan. So stay tuned for that conversation. Also, we're going to hear about the resignation of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And obviously that's pending until a new leader of the Liberal Party and effectively new PM is going to be chosen. We're going to talk more, though, about what is going to happen to the tax changes proposed by his government in the face of what's happening here. So that's all coming up with Crystal Lee, that analysis after our local news. I'll just mention in traffic, things are moving well so far. Call us, though, if you do see a problem. We should be reporting on the air here. 788-3093. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, you feel a difference when you step outside this morning. It's minus 15 right now. A south breeze is going to warm us to minus 8 this afternoon. A top official at the Health Sciences Centre says the emergency room ran out of resuscitation beds around the time a middle-aged man died yesterday morning. The hospital's chief operating officer, Dr. Sean Young, says the ER has 6 resuscitation beds.
They're the most critical beds in the entire province. So when we start running out of room resuscitation in particular, that's when we start to get nervous and we start calling internal surges, whether it's surgery or medicine or sometimes other programs requiring the capacity. They'll figure out what patients can be moved.
Young says the patient arrived by ambulance around just after midnight yesterday morning. He was assessed as low acuity. After 8 hours, staff noticed his condition had worsened. Young says by the time they got him to a resuscitation bed, the patient had no pulse. He says investigators will determine whether the death is a critical incident. A Winnipeg man who was recently rushed to hospital says he feels for the family of the patient who died waiting for care at the Health Sciences Centre. Jeff Willison says hearing about his death yesterday shocked him. The 57-year-old says it could have been him. Willison says when he arrived by ambulance at St. Boniface Hospital on Friday, he waited hours on a stretcher in the ER.
It literally looked like a war zone. There had to be a minimum of 3 other EMS teams in front of me waiting to check in. It was like looking at people in a Costco line trying to get out of Costco. There was a lady who looked like it was my grandmother crying for help.
After spending more hours in the waiting room, Willison decided to go home without seeing a doctor. He worries patients depending on care in the ER are not being triaged properly and are waiting too long for the right bed to open up. In other news, the cost of insuring a car in Manitoba is about to go up, an average of $51 a year. That's for the average vehicle. The Public Utilities Board has ordered Manitoba Public Insurance to raise its basic rates 5.7%. MPI wanted a 3% hike, even though it needed a hike more than double to cover costs. Matt Wiebe, the NDP minister responsible for MPI, suggests his government gave the Crown Corporation Board direction to seek a lower rate hike.
We respect the work of the PUB. We respect the decision that they've made, but it shows that there's more work that we need to do to get the corporation on track and continue to focus on affordability to keep car insurance cheaper for Manitobans.
The Public Utilities Board says a lower rate hike now would have led to higher rates later. A patient who says she experienced excruciating pain during a medical procedure at St. Boniface Hospital is now suing. The woman went to the emergency department at St. B in December 2022 because of a painful cyst. The lawsuit says she underwent a medical procedure, but it was extremely painful because of anesthetic issues. The lawsuit says she could feel everything during the procedure and called out in pain several times, was crying throughout the procedure. St. Boniface Hospital has not yet filed a defense statement, and the allegations have not been proven in court. The lawsuit seeks damages for things like the patient's loss of income since she hasn't been able to return to work as a nurse. A Winnipeg City Councillor worries about the number of vacant building fires in the inner city. Ross Eady represents people living in the Mynarski ward, including North Point Douglas. A vacant building, Holy Ascension Greek Orthodox Church on Euclid, was damaged Monday night by fire, the 4th time in a little more than 3 years. Eady says it is sad and stressful.
I feel for the congregation there, but we have businesses that are getting burnt out. We have homes, apartment blocks. It's out of hand.
There were 182 fires in vacant buildings between January and September last year, more than any other year since 2018. Liberal MPs meet today in Ottawa for the first time since Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his resignation. The National Caucus meeting will focus on how the party will go about selecting a new leader and what that new leader needs to bring to the table.
We need a leader who can hit the ground running. We don't have time to have a leader who needs training wheels.
This is going to be a good opportunity to grow the party, re-energize the party.
I think Canadians, they want progressive leadership, and they don't want gimmicks, and they don't want slogans. They really want someone who's going to be serious.
A cross-section of Liberal MPs. At this point, at least one candidate is officially in the race. Frank Baylis is a medical technology business executive and a former Quebec Liberal MP. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. A fast start for the Jets.
They jab away, and they score! And it's Barron!
Morgan Barron in the first period on TSN. 16 seconds later, Josh Morrissey would add another as the Winnipeg Jets stopped their losing skid, beating the Nashville Predators 5-2. And it was an important win for goalie Connor Hellebuck, his 300th career win. Hellebuck skated out of his net, lifting the Jets emblem on his jersey towards the fans.
Always trying to share the moment with the fans. At the
heart of our game, and we're kind of entertainers, and they've been with us through the start of it. So everyone that was in the crowd tonight, I was trying to give them a piece of that emotion that I was feeling.
The Jets next face the Los Angeles Kings in town Friday night. You can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather, I don't know how busy you are. I'm just going to ask you on air here. Can you stick around for a second?
For a sec, yeah.
Okay, so weather traffic coming up in just a moment here, but we just had this story on about goats, right? Goats, you can recycle your Christmas tree, they'll eat it.
Yeah, they
right?
love it apparently.
Apparently they do. So, but I was saying, off air, we got to chatting because I've always wanted a goat. And Abby grew up with goats, but Abby has like this story about a goat and a very different thing. Now, you also are you guys are both grew up on farms, right? So yeah. So, I mean, goats are also in the food chain. I'm just flagging that for this story. But did you have your own goat? Like, was it part of learning? Your grandma gave you one? Is that?
When that story came up, I was cringing. I was like staring at me and my eyes just went big and it was like bulging out of my, because when at my, young age, once you cross 10, my grandpa would make you, he calls it the age of responsibility. You get 2 birds and anything that has 4 legs, be it a pig or a goat. And I chose a goat.
Did you ever have a goat, Heath?
No.
Okay.
In fact, goats are relatively new to me.
Okay, so you had a goat.
So I thought it was cute because this goat also happens to be a fainting goat.
Oh, the ones that just fall over?
It falls. So,
I love those.
Best. I love them.
Yeah, you can go down a rabbit hole of YouTube videos on those things.
I guess this goat, down, I had this goat in the system and it had kids and, grandchildren. And fast forward to when I was like 17, 18 and I bought my first car and I went to the village, the farm to go see my grandparents.
And what kind of car was it? This was a big deal.
It was a Toyota.
Yeah.
A Toyota Corolla. I remember that. I polished the tires, washed it.
Now, you have to know this, okay? I come to work every morning and I park between Abby and Heather, and these are car people. My car, I'm always like embarrassed. I'm like, oh no, look at it. It's like leaking rust out of the nuts and bolts. And then Heather and Abby, like always, their cars are meticulous, they're cleaned, beautiful.
So
right?
that tradition has always been with me.
Yeah, that's the thing.
This is this shiny black Toyota Corolla just parked there on the farm. And we were having lunch and I kept hearing a bang outside. And I thought, were they making construction that I didn't know about? There, I looked outside.
Look at Heather's face. She knows what's coming.
There is my goat having a good time with his own reflection, headbutting the driver's side of the car.
That is the best story.
Heather, no, this is it. And the other part of the story on the farm is my grandmother goes, if it's your birthday, you have to produce the food that the family will eat. And you need to produce the protein also. And I had my nominee for that Christmas period, which was the goat that destroyed my driver's side.
Was it?
Are you all right, Heather?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I have to tell you because I grew up on a cattle ranch, and I became a vegetarian at the age of 8.
Oh, yeah. Well, the goat. The goat was the gift.
The goat lived
the gift
good
of
life.
food.
It lived
a good
life.
Life. Yes, and then ruined your car.
Yeah, it ruined the car because
that's very funny.
I didn't know how to tell the insurance company that my goat destroyed the car.
Sorry, you didn't know how to tell them?
Yeah, they were like, "Were you in an accident?" I'm like, "No."
Was it that bad?
It was he really dented the door.
Did they buy it?
They didn't buy it. I had to take it to like a body shop place to bid it back out, and it was not really good. I sold that car. I ended up selling it because it wasn't looking good.
Look at Abby. It's like 30 years later, and he's still like, it's fresh in his mind. It's fresh in his mind.
I feel bad every time I think about goats.
Oh my gosh, though, to be 17 and have that shiny new car and hearing those bangs, man.
Yeah.
All right, Heather is back, not just to listen to goat stories. She's actually back with more news before the top of the clock, and so we'll check in with her. And Abby, you have weather to get us through this time for your regional forecast on CBC.
Yep, it's a chilly and cloudy day, and of course, we're going to see freezing temperatures across a board. Winnipeg and surrounding areas will definitely be seeing cloudy skies, also with some chilly winds to come later. We're looking at temperatures around minus 15 at this time. Expect a cloudy day. We do have this light southerly breeze that will be felt. A high would be around minus 8 later, though the wind chill for this morning feels like minus 28. So if you're making the transition from one bus to another, be prepared for that. Heading west to Brandon, minus 11 at this time, though with misty conditions. Expect some clouds in the region. Light snow in the forecast this morning, already being reported here and there. So prepare for that. That fog patches would clear as you get into the day. And for Brandon, we're going to see highs around minus 4. The wind chill this morning now, however, is feeling like minus 22, but it's going to ease to around minus 9 later in the day. Similar conditions in the South Central and Pembina Valley region. For Winnipeg, we're looking at minus 17 at this time. Cloudy conditions and highs near minus 6 for folks along the Morden Winkler axis. In the Parkland region, Dauphin is sitting at minus 9 at this time. Partly cloudy skies we're seeing. Some that fog patches that we notice around the Brandon region also spreading towards that area. That should clear up this morning. Highs around minus 2. The Interlake region, Gimli is sitting at minus 16 and mostly cloudy. We will see these cloudy conditions with some breeze from the south later in the day. Highs around minus 8. The wind chill makes it feel like minus 29 for folks in Gimli today. For the Pamphlet Flon, we're looking at mainly cloudy skies with temperatures around minus 9. The high for that region is minus 1 today, so that's going to be kind of mild. But the wind chill this morning feels like minus 18, so it's I'd say it's a good one for folks in the Pamphlet Flon. Then we go up north. We're finding Thompson sitting at minus 15 with some drifting snow at this time. Similar condition in Churchill. We're seeing light snow falling in Churchill this morning. Churchill's expecting about 5 centimeters of snow, but for the temperatures at this time in the region, Churchill at minus 22, Thompson at minus 15.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
May McKillop has been waiting patiently to tell us about traffic. What's up?
Well, I love the story. I have to say, we'll start with that. I love the story. But looking outside of our city at some highway conditions, we're seeing some reduced visibility, poor visibility in the western side of the province along Highway Number 1 out of Brandon into Saskatchewan, as well as in the Riding Mountain National Park region. Highway Number 10 up to Dauphin through Brandon is looking like a little slippery, a little foggy. Also going Highway 16 into Neepawa. I've seen that expand in the last half hour, so we'll keep an eye on that. Anything else you're seeing out there in the commute, whether it's a stalled car, traffic standard down, maybe a goat in your car, give us a call. Let us know. 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, May. Let's move on to business news now. Chrisley Ramlakan joins us. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So there are a lot of headlines emerging from our first story, and a lot of Canadians wondering, should we worry? Is this bluster? Is this serious? Could this happen? I'm talking about U.S. President-elect Donald Trump saying he's willing to use, quote, economic force to absorb Canada into the United States. So what is going on, and what has been the response from our government, Crystal?
Well, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has obviously dismissed this by reiterating what the Canadian government has said for some time now. Merging countries is not in the realm of possibility. And on X, Trudeau even wrote, there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would become part of the United States. So now, when pressed on the issue, Trump later acknowledged he has no right to absorb the country into his own, but he did still criticize American spending on Canadian goods. Canada and the U.S. have a $1 trillion trade relationship, and the U.S. imported $614 billion worth of goods from Canada in 2022, and is also Canada's best customer when it comes to oil and petroleum. But Trump has still reiterated his intent to impose tariffs on us here in Canada and Mexico when he returns to the White House in less than 2 weeks. Now, Gordon Giffen, a former U.S. ambassador to Canada, says Trump's blustering here about absorbing Canada is a negotiating strategy to try to add urgency to his long-standing economic grievances.
That was echoed actually by the current but outgoing U.S. ambassador to Canada was on our show earlier this week saying the same thing, that he thought it was bluster. But it's very interesting if you watch other news organizations on this, though, if you watch some of the U.S. stations or some of the global stations, about how they're looking at what Trump's been saying about not the tariffs, but about, taking on over other countries. Of course, Greenland's in this conversation as well. Yeah, I mean, we've never dealt with anything like this before to even have to analyze it. So
Yeah, exactly.
What a time we're living in. All right, let's talk about the resignation of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as Liberal leader and effectively as PM once a successor is chosen. What's going to happen to the tax changes proposed by his government in the meantime?
Yeah, so the federal government says the Canada Revenue Agency will continue to administer the capital gains tax changes proposed in the budget last year, even though they haven't passed in Parliament, which is prorogued until March 24th. So that wiped the House of Commons docket of bills and motions that had yet to receive royal assent and has caused some confusion around the capital gains proposal, which would boost the rate of tax some Canadians pay on capital gains or profits they sell from things like selling assets like stocks, a family business, or a cottage. So the Finance Department says parliamentary convention dictates that taxation proposals are effective as soon as the government tables a notice of a Ways and Means motion. And in September, the Liberals did table a notice of a Ways and Means motion that introduced a bill meant to raise the portion of capital gains on which companies pay tax to 2/3 from 1/2. And that policy would also apply to individuals with capital gains earnings above $250,000. So the Finance Department says the CRA will issue taxpayer forms in accordance with these proposed rules by January 31st. But the department says the CRA will stop administering the policy if Parliament resumes, and the government signals it will no longer proceed with these changes.
And finally, a Canadian-based retailer, another one, is filing for protection. What are the details of this store?
Yes, so this is Frank & Oak, which is $70 million in debt. So the fashion brand started as an online business in Montreal. It grew substantially and was purchased by American firm Unified Commerce Group in 2020. And so Frank & Oak now has boutiques in Montreal, Ontario, Nova Scotia, and British Columbia. But Frank & Oak owes $1.7 million to the CRA, $3.5 million to the Canada Border Services Agency. And while the company is blaming the pandemic for its financial problems, the Quebec Retail Council says retail businesses in general are facing major challenges, with consumers having low purchasing power, plus competition from cheap discount online retailers like Temu and Shein. So like we were saying, Frank & Oak also filed for bankruptcy protection back in 2020. And the Quebec Retail Council says almost half, so 46% of Quebec's retail businesses filed for bankruptcy in 2023. So that just shows the pressure on some businesses.
That's an astonishing number, 46% actually, right? What's going on in the markets this morning?
So in Europe, markets are trading higher. Germany is up, the UK is up, France is up. In Asia, markets are mixed. Japan is down, Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is down. Oil is up at 34 cents to 74.59 US per barrel. Gold is up 20 cents to $2,648.50 US per ounce. And the dollar is still down. It's down 0.02 of a cent to 69.6 cents US.
All right. Thank you very much, Crystal Lee.
Thanks, Marcy.
Crystal Lee Ramlicam with our business news. Next on our medical column, Dr. Raj Bhardwaj talks about starting off the year with some ideas for people who frankly don't like to exercise. Here's our conversation about it.
Good morning, Marcy.
I do like to exercise, but I like team sports, and then I get tired, and then it's cold, and people have a lot of different targets for their own New Year's resolutions. As you see it, why should moving more be on the list?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone knows that exercising is part of a healthy lifestyle, right? It decreases your risk of heart attack and stroke. It lowers your blood pressure, lowers your risk of developing type 2 diabetes. It's also, being more active is associated with lower risks of a lot of different kinds of cancer as well. And, makes sense that moving more promotes stronger muscles and bones. It also helps your brain quite a bit. I mean, it improves cognitive function and sleep, and it helps with stress management and improving your mood. And, I think some people might not realize that physical activity actually lowers your risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia as you age. So for me, the big thing is moving more doesn't just improve your chances of living longer, it improves your chances of living healthier for longer, which I think is the goal for most people. And I tell my patients, look, if moving more were available as a pill, you would be asking me for a prescription.
What's the difference between moving more and exercising? Is it sweat? Like if you're sweating,
yeah.
you're exercising? Or is that, someone once said that to me, so I'm just wondering if you measure it like that.
Yeah, so that's one way to think of it. The other way that I think of it is with exercise, it's something that you plan for, right? Like you said, team sports, you have a schedule, you put it in the calendar, you've got special clothes and shoes and things like that. And there are some people who honestly just don't like to exercise, right? They're not going to go for a run. You'll never see them in a gym. They're not going to join an exercise class. They maybe don't like team sports, whatever. But moving more is something that you can build into your day. So, when you go to the mall, park at the furthest parking lot or parking spot away from the door, and maybe park at the end of the mall furthest away from the store that you're going to visit so you can walk indoors for part of that. Moving more might just mean, okay, when I go to the mall, I'm going to take the stairs rather than the elevator or escalator. You don't have to commit to taking the stairs all the way up to your 12th floor office or something like that. Moving more might also mean, okay, I'm going to do my own housework and my own yard work and stuff instead of hiring somebody to do those things. Or flip side, taking the time that you save by hiring a person and using that time to go for a walk around your neighborhood or something. So in a perfect world, yeah, everyone should do at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week. But at least half of us are not hitting that goal. And as I've said before, perfect is the enemy of good. So you don't have to be perfect when it comes to exercising. Moving more is good. And moving more is a whole lot better than not moving much.
According to the research, though, will moving more actually get a person the same benefits as exercising?
Yeah, so there was an interesting study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine this past November. The researchers were basically doing statistical stuff. They were trying to crunch numbers on sort of how much longer a person might live if they were more active and how much activity it took to reap those benefits. So they ran the numbers on American statistics. So they found for the average American over 40, you could live an extra 5.3 years, an extra 5 years longer, if everyone was as active as the top 25% of the population. And they figured that if you're in the bottom 25% of the population in terms of the amount of activity you get, then doing 1 extra hour of walking per day could add about 6 hours of extra life expectancy. So the biggest gains in life expectancy were in the people who were the least active. And then in terms of, how hard do you have to work to get this sort of benefit, there's what we call a dose response for exercise and health benefits, meaning the higher the dose of exercise or movement, the greater the response in your health. But it's not a simple linear relationship. So the steepest benefits actually occur at the lower end of the curve, meaning that going from a sedentary lifestyle to even small amounts of regular activity, like 10 minutes a day more than you were doing, can give dramatic health improvements. And the dose response is going to be different for different health benefits, right? So if you want to increase your bone density, yeah, it's going to take more intense exercise, for longer than if you want mental health benefits. For mental health benefits, the improvement in sleep and mood and stuff are big, even at low doses of additional movement. And, like I said, the intensity also makes a difference. The higher intensity exercises have a steeper dose response graph, but even short bursts of relatively intense movements, like walking upstairs briskly or a 5 or 10 minute walk, still give meaningful health benefits.
Well, we ask a lot of people this question in this month, but I'm going to ask it to you. What are some ways do you think people can use to stick to resolutions that they might make?
Yeah, so one basic thing I think is that you should focus on the process and not on the outcome. So a lot of people say, well, I'm going to lose X number of pounds, and you're really focusing on the outcome. Whereas I think people will do better if they focus on doing the things that you know will help you to lose the weight or drop your blood pressure or whatever else your goal is. So that's one big thing is focus on the process. And then the other thing, you've probably heard about SMART goals. SMART is an acronym. I don't think it's a fantastic one. I would rearrange the letters if I could. But SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So the first two are specific and measurable. Specific measurable goals are easier to stick to than vague ones. So rather than, I'm going to exercise more, or even worse, I'm going to get healthy this year. Try something specific. I'm going to walk or bike or whatever for 20 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week. So specific and measurable. And A is achievable, right? So if you are not somebody who walks a lot, then maybe 20 minutes 3 times a week is not achievable for you. And if you end up being super ambitious with your goal setting, there's a bigger chance that you're just not going to hit those goals. You're going to give up on the habits that might get you to that. So something achievable is really important. And I think the most important one is relevant. So these goals should be personal and relevant to you and your life and your, habits and your preferences. You like team sports. Other people hate team sports. Some people need an exercise buddy or a walking friend or something to go with to motivate them to get out there. Other people are like, I don't want to talk to anybody when I'm walking. I just want to do it on my own. So it has to be relevant and personal to you and your life. And then the T is time bound. So set some boundaries. Either a finish line or a check-in time when you can kind of report back to yourself and see how you're doing. And even if you're perfect, if you miss a day, don't beat yourself up. Perfect is the enemy of good. We're going for good here, right? You don't need a marathon or to lift your own body weight to be healthy. Just move more.
All right, Dr. Bardwash, thank you.
My pleasure.
That's our medical column for this week, and it's time for headlines at 7:03 with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, investigators at the Health Sciences Center are combing over notes and video surveillance to determine why a middle-aged man died in the emergency room early yesterday. He had arrived by ambulance, was assessed as low acuity. After 8 hours, staff noticed his condition had worsened. By the time he got into a resuscitation bed, the hospital's chief operating officer says there was no pulse. Come April, you will start paying more to insure your vehicle in Manitoba. The cost is about to go up $51 a year for the average car. The Public Utilities Board has ordered MPI to raise its basic rates 5.7% higher than MPI had asked. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
We have backups in traffic. We had a call on our commuter line, westbound north perimeter between Route 90 and McPhillips. Traffic very backed up apparently there. We don't have a reason for it. So if you are out and about in that area and you have anything to add, that is westbound north perimeter between Route 90 and McPhillips. Traffic very backed up at this hour. 788-3093 is where you can call us on the commuter line. In Winnipeg, a high of -8 is what we're expecting, but don't be fooled. With wind chill, it'll feel like -28. And then into tonight, some light snow starting for us. This morning, however, in the city, it is -15 degrees and it's mostly cloudy. In the next hour of the program, out of that story Heather was mentioning about the man that died in the ER department, we are going to talk to a patient advocate about the Health Sciences Center's emergency department, a waiting room and area, and also about what concerns her about what she's been hearing. So stay tuned for that. Also in the next hour of Information Radio right after 7 o'clock, a new survey commissioned by CBC News is giving us a better picture about what it's really like to come to Canada as a newcomer. We'll have the details with a national reporter who will walk us through the stats. And in a moment on World Report, you're going to hear part one of what we have understood from that survey. So do stay tuned for the latest in national and international news.
On the current.
She wishes the government would give her rights so she can give her kids a secure future.
Undocumented migrants are at the center of political controversy in the United States, but hundreds of thousands of people are undocumented in Canada as well, and advocates say they should get citizenship rights. That's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford has a message for Donald Trump. Canada is not for sale.
But I have a better idea. Why don't we create Fortress AmCan and make sure it's the richest, wealthiest, most prosperous jurisdiction in 2 countries anywhere in the world?
Ford spoke on Fox News last night, reacting to U.S. President-elect saying he plans to acquire Canada.
Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security.
Ford says Canada and the United States are 2 proud, independent countries, and they should work together on one great trade deal. The federal Liberals are urgently seeking a new leader who can stand up to Trump, as well as Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. The caucus is meeting today in Ottawa. Here's what MPs say they want.
We need a leader who can hit the ground running. We don't have time to have a leader who needs training wheels.
This is going to be a good opportunity to grow the party, re-energize the party.
I think Canadians, they want progressive leadership, and they don't want gimmicks, and they don't want slogans. They really want someone who's going to be serious.
When Justin Trudeau steps down as Prime Minister, the oil and gas industry may be particularly happy to see him go. The oil patch has often been vocally opposed to Trudeau, but as Paula Duhatschek explains, it was not always this way.
No country would find 173 billion barrels of oil in the ground and just leave them there.
It's a scene that would be hard to picture if there wasn't video evidence. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at a 2017 energy conference in Houston. He spoke to a room full of about 1,200 oil patch leaders and executives and got a standing ovation at the end of it. Trudeau spoke to the importance of balancing economic and environmental priorities.
It takes compromise, it takes hard work, but it is possible.
But in the end, many oil patch insiders feel he didn't hit the mark. During his tenure, Trudeau bought the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which has significantly boosted this country's oil exports. But Martha Hall-Findlay, former chief sustainability officer at the energy company Suncor, says policies like the proposed oil and gas emissions cap have been deeply unpopular.
This is not the only industry that produces emissions, but it is the only industry that the federal government has chosen to actively impose caps on.
Richard Masson with the University of Calgary School of Public Policy thinks all the fighting over policy made it harder for the government to hit its environmental goals.
The 9 years has been characterized by a lot of conflict that at the end didn't achieve many of the objectives that the Liberals were looking for.
In recent days, oil and gas stocks have climbed on the news Trudeau is stepping down. Paula Duhatschek, CBC News, Calgary.
Three major fires are tearing across parts of Southern California. 30,000 people have been forced to flee their communities in the Los Angeles area. Firefighters say strong winds are fueling the flames, making it difficult to get the fires under control. Steve Futterman joins me now from the Pacific Palisades in Los Angeles. And Steve, what is the latest?
Well, Marcia, the fires are taking place in various parts of the Los Angeles basin. The major fire that we've been focusing on is in Pacific Palisades. That's on the west side. It's near the ocean, near Malibu. And that fire has really destroyed, I would say, dozens of homes. I was along Pacific Coast Highway last night. I drove by there. It looks almost like a ghost town. So many of these homes, which I've driven by for years, maybe the most beautiful locations in the world on the Pacific Ocean, many of these homes have been destroyed. Another area that's being hit hard is the Pasadena area, maybe close to 100 kilometers away from here. We're talking about another area where the winds have just picked up. These are Santa Ana winds. They are winds that always have caused problems, but I have never seen the winds this strong in such a widespread area. And it's just very difficult, almost impossible for firefighters to do much. They're trying to contain the fire, but they're not succeeding at all.
How long could this go on?
Well, it's going to go on for at least much of today. The winds are going to possibly begin to die down. I emphasize begin to die down later in the day, but we've had some gusts measured at nearly 160 kilometers an hour. So the forecast calls for them to begin to die down later today. So these firefighters are not going to get any help until the end of the day. Then they hope to get the upper hand, but it's going to take some time.
Thank you, Steve. Steve Futterman in Los Angeles. The fires in Los Angeles in the area have forced the cancellation of an in-person announcement by the Screen Actors Guild. The SAG nominations for the Best in Movies and Television were supposed to be announced at a live event this morning, but given the dangerous fire situation, they will instead be revealed in a news release. The search for survivors continues today in a remote part of Tibet. Yesterday's 7.1 magnitude earthquake killed at least 126 people. More than 100 others were injured, and many more people could be trapped under rubble. As our South Asia correspondent Salima Shivji reports, the freezing temperatures are making rescue efforts difficult.
A group of firefighters struggle to reach a man trapped under a collapsed building. He makes it out, but the search for other survivors is increasingly frantic in the remote region of Tibet after the deadly earthquake hit yesterday. More than 400 people caught under piles of rubble have been rescued, Chinese authorities say, but they didn't specify how many are still missing, and the urgency is growing. Temperatures hovered at -18 overnight, the risk of hypothermia high. Earthquakes are common in the area right on a geological fault line, but this is one of the most powerful in recent years. The initial tremor shook buildings in neighboring Nepal, Bhutan, and India and caused havoc some 80 kilometers away on the world's highest mountain, Mount Everest, where German climber Jost Kobusch was camped.
My tent was shaking pretty intensely, so I looked out and I saw many avalanches coming down, seracs collapsing, big chunks of glacier exploding.
Chinese officials say several thousand rescue workers and soldiers are on site, doubling their efforts to save anyone trapped and protect those left homeless from the bitter cold. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
Today, people who lost loved ones on flight PS752 are marking a sad milestone, 5 years since Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps shot down the plane. It was leaving Tehran with 176 people on board. Many of them were Canadian citizens or permanent residents.
It is something that it's too hard to believe, still too hard to believe.
Benhaz Abedi attended a candlelight vigil in Toronto yesterday. Her son's fiancé died on the plane. Canada and other countries are trying to hold Iran accountable at the International Court of Justice. It could be years before that case is resolved. Deportations from Canada are going up. The Canada Border Services Agency says since last March, 10,000 people have been kicked out of the country for breaking immigration rules. An estimated 500,000 undocumented people are in Canada. And growing deportations come as undocumented workers are speaking up. Lindsay Duncombe reports.
Amelia scrubs a bathtub in an Airbnb. We aren't saying where she lives or using her real name because she is undocumented and risks deportation. It's very stressful, she says. Amelia is a single mom with 2 kids. She came to Canada from Mexico, where she says she felt threatened by cartels. She works under the table for cash, often for less than minimum wage, and sometimes in unsafe conditions. The system treats us like ghosts, she says, like we don't exist. Irene Blumrad runs the Centre for Migration at UBC. She expects the number of undocumented people in Canada to increase because cuts to the number of legal immigrants allowed may cause others to go underground, and Donald Trump's plans to deport 11 million people from the United States.
I think it's definitely going to go higher. How much higher, we don't know.
Since March 2022, Canada has deported more than 35,000 people for breaking immigration rules. Immigration Minister Mark Miller describes those numbers as historically high.
We're very serious about that.
A recent Leger poll done for the Association for Canadian Studies found 48% of Canadians believe mass deportations are needed to stop illegal migration. Still, as someone willing to do jobs others won't, Amelia says she hopes she will be given a chance to stay. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
And Welcome to Canada is a CBC News series continuing through January. For the full story on our survey of 1,500 newcomers, go to cbcnews.ca/Welcome to Canada. That is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio live downtown in Winnipeg. You're on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. We have much ahead this hour on the show, but we're going straight to Heather Wells because our news department has been busy still gathering details on today's top story. Heather Wells is here now. Good morning.
Good morning. And yes, this is a story we first learned about yesterday. A middle-aged man going to the Health Sciences Centre and waiting 8 hours before being pronounced dead. A top official at Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre says investigators now are looking into that death. Dr. Sean Young says the patient arrived by ambulance and was assessed as low acuity. And after 8 hours, staff noticed his condition had worsened. Young says by the time they got him to a resuscitation bed, the patient had no pulse. We're going to hear more from Dr. Young. As well, the lawyer for the family of Brian Sinclair says this latest death should never have happened. Sinclair was an Indigenous man who died in the HSC emergency room 16 years ago. Sinclair had waited 34 hours. So we'll be back with more on those stories and others coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
And so, as you can see, we have building news and different angles happening on this important story. Now, this hour on our program at 10 to 8, in addition to what Heather's been mentioning, we're also going to update you on a patient advocate's point of view. So we're going to talk to that patient advocate who says she was, quote, shocked about this most recent death in Health Sciences Centre's emergency department. And we're going to hear from her. That's coming up just ahead of 8 o'clock. In addition, this hour on the program, we are going to be hearing more about a story that if you were with CBC at the top of the clock, you may have heard a little about in World Report today. And that is this new survey that was commissioned by CBC News. It does give us a better picture about what it's like to come to Canada as a newcomer. We have a full report, though, about those statistics, how the survey collection was data was gathered, rather, for the survey, and also a Manitoba perspective. There's some Manitoba numbers in this survey, so we can understand some things about people's feelings about immigrating to Canada, rather. So stay tuned. That is coming up this half hour. Right now, let's plug you into your Wednesday morning. First, starting with what it's like out there with the weather. Here's Abby Adiemi.
Good morning once again. Cold and cloudy day across board, and we should be seeing some light snow in the northern parts of the province, especially in Churchill for today. But right now, Winnipeg, we're seeing mostly cloudy skies, temperatures around minus 15. Expect a mainly cloudy day in the city with light southerly breeze. Our high will get to minus 8 later today. However, the wind chill feels like minus 28 as you start your day, so prepare for that. You need to be cautious of frostbite on exposed skin. The clouds are going to stick around tonight. Temperatures will drop further to around minus 21, but then it's going to climb back to minus 17 by tomorrow morning. Brandon, we're still seeing that misty conditions with temperatures near minus 12, and then for the Parkland region, we're looking at partly cloudy skies. Up north, that snow still continues with frigid temperatures around minus 23. So across board, it's more like the wind chills is making it feel colder. So expect like a cloudy day across the regions with light snow flurries in some areas, and the weather in Winnipeg is similar to other parts in the southern parts of the province for today.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
May McKillop is in for Corey this morning and has our commute news. Hello.
Hello. Just looking at our north perimeter, the westbound north perimeter, in between Route 90 and McPhillips is pretty backed up. And I learned just in the last half hour that's because there's emergency crews on Pipeline Road there. So travel safely in that area. On the perimeter, also looking outside of the city, we're seeing a lot of partly covered conditions and some poor visibility, particularly on the western side of the province, on Highway number 1 west of Brandon, as well up Highway number 10 into the Riding Mountain National Park area, and even looking northern into the province. Partly covered conditions and reduced visibility up into the Paul and all the way to Churchill. That's all I'm seeing.
Abby's auditioning for his job at the Oscars. Playing the music to get May out of the studio. I'm just teasing. The traffic line, by the way, the commuter line is 788-3093. That's where you can reach us. Well, let's get to this new survey that I've been mentioning, commissioned by CBC News. It tells us more about what it's like to come to Canada as a newcomer. The survey was done by market research firm Pilara, asking more than 1,500 adults who've arrived in the past 10 years about their experiences. Now, meantime, Canada also has the sharp cuts right now to immigration targets. Those are underway. In 2025, the plan is to reduce the number of permanent residents by 21%, you might recall, but also cut the number of temporary residents, including international students, by 10%. The CBC's Alexander Silberman has been digging deeper into the findings of the survey.
Good morning.
So what did we learn about the experience, as mentioned, of recent immigrants to Canada?
Well, Marcy, the experiences were overall pretty positive when settling in Canada. 8 in 10 newcomers across the country told us that. But many newcomers reported a lot of challenges that all Canadians are experiencing. Problems like access to healthcare and finding affordable housing. Another big finding that jumped out, the majority of newcomers believe Canada has accepted too many immigrants without proper planning. CBC News commissioned this survey because we wanted to hear from newcomers themselves to learn more about what it's like to immigrate to Canada today, especially considering the current economy, job market, and the housing crisis that we're in.
So can you expand on the survey and who we did hear from then?
So the survey was conducted for CBC News by the firm Pilara, and it focused specifically on adults who've arrived in Canada within the past 10 years. About 1,500 newcomers were surveyed in November, including refugees, international students, people from every possible immigration pathway. The survey put questions to people living in every province, including Manitoba, covering a wide range of topics, everything from the job market to building social connections. Now, after collection, Pilara went ahead and adjusted the data based on Statistics Canada demographic information. This resulted in a margin of error of plus or minus 2.5%. So Pilara and the CBC research team believe the findings are a pretty strong representation of the newcomer population in Canada.
Now, the big overall finding was that newcomers are generally happy here. Why is that, though?
That's right. Newcomers overwhelmingly reported being happy with their quality of life in Canada, especially when it comes to things like their sense of community, safety, and the immigration process they went through. 8 in 10 say they're satisfied with their life in Canada. People largely found that adapting was easy. They pointed to things like it wasn't too hard to find food from their culture at the local grocery store and fairly easy to take transportation to get around. 3/5 also said they had a positive experience accessing support services for new immigrants, but they reported some challenges. Many newcomers say it costs too much to immigrate to Canada and that they spent far more than they expected. The survey also asked about Canada's immigration levels. That was a question that got an interesting response. Newcomers say immigrants are good for Canada, but 8 in 10 believe Canada has accepted too many without proper planning, housing, infrastructure, or jobs.
Now, those are obviously big concerns for a lot of Canadians right now. What's the reality like for newcomers when it comes to cost of living, economy, and the housing crisis?
Well, almost all newcomers reported challenges when looking for a job, and many said their lack of Canadian experience made it difficult to get a position in their field. The survey also found racialized newcomers in particular faced an even more difficult job search. Only 42% of them reported having a paying job in their area of expertise. Compare that to 53% of white newcomers. Now, to get more specific, in Alberta, in the prairies, Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, 4 in 10 newcomers are making less than $50,000 a year, even though most of them have a college or a trades education or a university degree. In Manitoba and Saskatchewan, nearly half of respondents say they'd leave for another province if they got the chance, citing better job opportunities and a lifestyle change as their main reasons. Overall, the cost of living was a big concern, with 8 in 10 saying it's too expensive to live in Canada, and many are blaming the cost of housing for that.
Obviously, housing's tough to find. We've done lots of stories here in Winnipeg about it. What is the housing hunting experience like specifically for people new to Canada?
Yeah, not too great, Marcy. Newcomers face some extra challenges in finding housing. Half of newcomers say they had trouble affording rent or housing when they first arrived. And the issue gets worse for those who came within the past 5 years. But many reported simply finding a home to rent or buy when they arrived was an issue, regardless of the cost. I met a family in Saskatoon that really struggled to find proper housing. Vineet and Diksha Jain arrived from India last year with some pretty high hopes. They came as immigrants nominated by the provincial government. Vineet is an engineer and Diksha works in human resources. So they were selected because their professions are needed here in Saskatchewan. But they still struggled to find jobs, with Vineet eventually taking a job as a cashier at 7-Eleven just to get by. The hunt for housing did not go well either. With no credit history in Canada, references, or jobs, landlords kept saying no. They ended up renting a room inside someone's house while continuing to search for a place of their own. The Jains told me they were so discouraged by their housing situation, they started doubting their decision to immigrate to Canada.
We were worried a lot because there was always a tension back of our mind that we need to get into some good and bigger accommodation so that we can prioritize and plan for our family in the future to make our family bigger and greater. So how can we do that if we stay in this shared accommodation?
At the same point of time, I was feeling like we should give up and maybe we should go back to our home country. I don't think this is going to work anymore. We are doing our hunt for house, but we are not getting anything.
Diksha Jain says a lot of newcomers she knows are facing similar challenges, and she's worried they might fall victim to scams or be taken advantage of by landlords.
Now, the rising rents and housing prices have some pointing the finger at Canada's record level immigration rates. We have also heard the Liberal government say that the number of people coming into the country is making the housing crisis worse. What are housing experts saying?
Well, the experts I spoke with say the issue is much more nuanced than simply suggesting that newcomers are eating up the housing supply. I talked to Steve Pomeroy. He's a housing policy researcher at McMaster University. He says a massive spike in non-permanent residents, like international students, created this surge in demand for rentals. And while new units are being built, he says the market simply needs time to catch up. But others argue Canada can't afford to scale back on immigration. Daniel Bernhardt is one of them. He's CEO of the Institute for Canadian Citizenship, an organization that helps bring newcomers to Canada. Here's what he had to say.
I would challenge anybody to look at a population map of Canada, look me in the eye and tell me that this place is full. I mean, it is clearly and absolutely not. So we have a lot of space. We, of course, need to build and anticipate for a growing society. But if we simply just say we need to slow the rate of immigration because of the number of available houses, then we are also going to slow our growth in the healthcare workforce, in early childhood education workforce, in a number of these categories where we have manifest shortages that are hurting Canadians right now.
So it's clear that newcomers are also feeling the pressure of those shortages based on what we learned from this survey. They're, of course, grappling with the same challenges many Canadians are facing right now. But like I mentioned earlier, most newcomers are happy to be here, and they want to make that clear. 8 in 10 say they're glad they came here, and most of them say they love Canada and feel a growing sense of attachment to the country.
Thank you for the report, Alexander. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Marcy.
That was Alexander Silberman. Now, this poll of about 1,500 people was conducted in November. It has a margin of error of approximately 2.5 percentage points. And to read more about it, you can go to CBC's website nationally, cbc.ca/welcome to Canada. Actually is a link that will get you there specifically. I want to pull a couple of things out of the conversation. So the first one is that nearly 50% of those in this survey that had ties to Manitoba said they would leave if they had a chance, and that they would be looking for better things. And so that is a big number that we should all obviously be thinking about, everyone here. Also, I want to invite you to weigh in, and we'd love to hear from you. So this was a survey of people that had arrived in the last 10 years. So I'm going to ask, in recent history, what was your experience coming to Manitoba as a newcomer in the past 10 years? And how would you improve things? I would love to hear from you. I've posted that on my Facebook page, Marcy Marcusa, but you can also give us a call. For the good things and the challenges. How would you improve things? 788-3205.
Be an Iron Man and curl. No, not your hair.
This is curling on the frozen ice of the Assiniboine River. Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is back February 7th to 9th. Form a team, embrace the winter with one hand, a rock with the other, and join the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
It is now 7:25 on the nose, and it is minus 15 in Winnipeg, mostly cloudy. We're going to be around minus 8 today, but the wind chill is going to feel like minus 28. So if you're already waiting for a bus out there or you're walking or biking to work, you know that you got to bundle up this morning in the city. Call us if there's any problems on the traffic, in the traffic situation. On the commuter line already, we've been hearing about the westbound North Perimeter. It is down to one lane approaching Pipeline Road. 788-3093 for any updates or details on that or other issues in traffic. You can give us a call. Well, Scott Reguera is here now with Morning Sports. Good morning to you.
Hey there, Marcy.
So it was a milestone night for one Jet in particular as they went on to beat Nashville last night.
For sure. Connor Hellebuck, Marcy, recording his 300th career win, becoming the third fastest to that mark. Only Andrei Vasilevsky and the great Jacques Plante have done it more quickly. Hellebuck was sitting on 299 wins for about a week, and he admits that he felt the pressure mounting to reach that milestone.
Feels good. The anticipation was killing me a little bit. It's not how I played out this week, but I thought the guys played so hard in front of me, and the crowd was incredible tonight. So, that's a very memorable one. For the longest time, I was just playing, and as you get a little older in this league, and things start to happen, and you start to achieve some things, that kind of sets in, and you start to realize that you're doing some great things.
Adding to the memorability of the game, Marcy, was that it came at home. Hellebuck was named the first star of the game. He skated around the ice, grabbing at the logo on his chest. Hellebuck told reporters that he wanted to share that moment with the fans that have been with him his whole career. So, very nice night on the whole, although Josh Morrissey, the Jets' top defenseman, did suffer an injury, had to come out. So we'll find out more, I'm sure, today on his condition. Winnipeg back in action Friday at home against the Kings next.
Yeah, super nice for the fans, that moment with Hellebuck. Plenty of action tonight on the ice again tonight, though, including a PWHL contest in Vancouver where there's talk of expansion.
Right. The first place Montreal Victoire taking on the last place Toronto Scepters in the second game of the so-called takeover tour. The first one was played over the weekend in Seattle, where more than 12,000 fans turned out. There'll be even more than that tonight in Vancouver, 19,000 plus for a game that sold out shortly after it was announced a few months back. Things should be especially exciting, Marcy, for Scepters defender Ryland McKinnon and Montreal forward Jen Gardner. They're both from BC. Here's Gardner.
All of the girls' organizations that are local are coming, and there's a blackout on that day as well, so there's no games being played so that all those players can attend. So I just think to see something like that, it goes to show how important it is to continue to expand this league and get these games all over North America, because people want to watch it and people want to be part of it. And yeah, I'm really excited to get to play that game. It's something I've always dreamed of doing, getting to play close to home.
Now, while great fan support, like we'll see tonight, is a guiding factor in where the PWHL chooses to expand next, Commissioner Jana Hefford says there are many other things to consider as well, things like how many girls are currently playing hockey in a potential market, what corporate partnership opportunities are out there, and what kind of access there is to proper training facilities. Vancouver would seem to score very well in each of those areas, although there is one that could prove quite a challenge. That is the distance of the city from the current to PWHL teams, Minnesota being the closest, 3.5 hours away. A little closer to Winnipeg, of course, than Vancouver.
Yep.
But there you go.
And the Raptors are back on the court tonight.
They are, where I think they're trying to win against the Knicks in New York. And let's be honest, this is a rebuilding campaign. Losing is like winning. And Toronto hasn't done much of the latter on the road this campaign. Just one victory in 15 tries. But how much incentive is there to try? According to tankathon.com, all of the Raptors losing has them in prime position now in the NBA's draft lottery. The website said this morning Toronto are now co-favorites to land the first overall pick, which will be Cooper Flagg. And if you haven't heard about the Duke forward, he is considered by scouts to be both an athletic freak And a generational talent, the buzzwords they have for these young guys. He's also nicknamed the main event because he's from that small northeastern state. He's NBA ready, and he's got an NBA ready nickname. So if Raptors fans are thinking about him tonight and not the actual Raptors as they play New York, maybe they can be excused.
That's a great nickname. Love it.
Isn't that great? The main event.
Yeah,
like
it's pretty cool, man. All right, thank you very much. Talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's Scott Ricker with sports on CBC. Well, still ahead. HIJKLMN. What? Is that part of the ABC song? Doesn't sound like the one I know. Maybe doesn't sound like the one that you might know as well. It's not the most common one, but we're going to take you to where those kids were singing the ABCs. We visit a Winnipeg kindergarten class to find out why a teacher supports changing up the ABC song. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's -15, and that long-awaited brief warm-up begins today, a high of -8. We continue to warm up overnight and tomorrow. Investigators at the Health Sciences Centre are combing over notes and surveillance to determine why a middle-aged man died in the emergency room yesterday. The man arrived by ambulance. He was assessed as low acuity. After 8 hours, staff noticed his condition had worsened. They rushed him to a resuscitation bed. The hospital's chief operating officer, Dr. Sean Young, says by then the patient had no pulse. Young says congestion in the ER was an issue. At one point, 100 people were waiting. Young says wait times at HSC have improved.
By no means are we seeing a worsening of our wait times over the last year. They've definitely been improving. They're not where we want them to be. It's going to be a long time before we get them to where we want them to be. But they have been improving over the last year.
Young says the investigation will determine whether the death is a critical incident. He says it will take several days to complete. Now, the lawyer for the family of Brian Sinclair says yesterday's death at the HSC ER is a tragedy. Sinclair was an Indigenous man who died while waiting 34 hours for care at HSC more than 16 years ago. Vilko Zabogar says Sinclair's death prompted changes to protocols that should have prevented this kind of death from happening.
His legacy should have been that would never, ever happen again. That's what the changes that were put in place by the health authorities were meant to accomplish. And it's quite disheartening to see it happening, something like this happening again.
Zabogar says Sinclair was Indigenous and was ignored because of discrimination. An inquest report called Sinclair's death preventable and made 63 recommendations. He says it's too soon to know what factors were involved in this latest death, but he says people should not die waiting for care. A Winnipeg man who recently waited hours for care in an emergency room isn't surprised to hear about the death at the HSC. Jeff Willison says that could have been him. The 57-year-old says he too recently was ambulanced to St. B. He waited hours there before being moved to a waiting room. In the end, he left without seeing a doctor.
I did say to myself, there's no way in hell I'm going to stay in this war zone. I'd much rather go home and die in peace in my own house than stay in that waiting room rotting with the lack of care from this healthcare system. I'm sick of it.
Willison fears others will face the same challenges when they need help the most. Get set to pay more to insure your vehicle. Manitoba's auto insurance rates rise April 1st. The Public Utilities Board ordered Manitoba Public Insurance to raise its basic rates by 5.7%. MPI wanted a 3% hike, even though it needed a hike more than double that to cover costs. The PUB found no evidence to support a lower rate. Matt Wiebe, NDP minister responsible for MPI, suggests his government gave the Crown Corporations Board direction to seek a lower rate hike.
We gave clear direction to that board. Our government's focus on affordability, that affordability should be their primary goal, keeping auto insurance rates affordable for Manitobans.
The Public Utilities Board says a lower hike now would lead to higher hikes later. A patient who underwent a medical procedure at St. Boniface Hospital says the experience caused her excruciating pain. The patient went to the hospital's emergency department in late 2022 because of a painful cyst. She was treated with intravenous fentanyl and a local anesthetic, but the patient says it didn't work and she could feel everything during the procedure. She now is suing St. Boniface Hospital and 2 staff members. The lawsuit says the patient was screaming out in pain and crying throughout the procedure. The hospital has not yet filed a defense statement. None of the allegations have been proven in court. People in North Point Douglas are worried after yet another fire Monday night in an empty building. The congregation of Holy Ascension Greek Orthodox Church on Euclid had already moved after previous fires and break-ins. Trinity Richardson lives in the area.
Kind of used to it now, but I have a son now, so it's kind of scary for him growing up. And I'm like, oh my God, how is he going to grow up? How is his community going to be when he grows up?
Area Councillor Ross Eady says more needs to be done to prevent fires caused by people going into vacant buildings. A big night for the Winnipeg Jets.
Room for Morrissey. Shoots! Scores!
Josh Morrissey in the first period on TSN. His goal coming just 16 seconds after Morgan Barron scored for Winnipeg. In the end, Winnipeg snaps a losing skid and beats the Nashville Predators 5-2. Now, that's not the only reason to celebrate. The win marked the 300th career win for Jets netminder Connor Hellebuck. It's a moment Hellebuck wanted to share with his fans.
Seeing how big we are in the community and how much people care about us, I think it's hard not to start to feel connected. And as time goes, you just grow stronger and closer to them.
Hellebuck skated out of the net last night after that win, lifting his Jets emblem to the fans. The Jets' next face, the Los Angeles Kings, who are in town Friday night. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
That's nice, hey? That
Really
means a lot
nice.
to the fans, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and he's here for the long haul. You know, he signed an 8-year agreement, so this is great. He's really feeling connected.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells with our news this morning. Let's get into what's going on in your forecast. 7:36 a.m. Wednesday morning. Here's Abby.
Good morning once again. We're waking up to a cloudy one, though it's cold in some of the regions. We should be seeing that the risk of frostbites in a lot of the regions today due to the wind chills. Snow is also expected to begin in some areas today. For Winnipeg, we are sitting at -15. Cloudy conditions we're seeing. Expect a high of -8, but the wind chills is going to make it feel like -28 this morning. And then tonight, we're going to see a little bit of snow near the midnight period with temperatures dropping to around -21. The central region, similar conditions to Winnipeg. In western Manitoba, Brandon sitting at -12 at this time, also mostly cloudy. That foggy condition you noticed earlier is clearing, but if you're still in some areas and sporting it, be careful. You see a high of -4 for folks in Brandon today. Wind chill makes it feel like -21, then it eases to -9 later in the day. In the Parkland region, we're looking at temperatures around -8 in Dauphin. Partly cloudy skies. Today will stay mostly cloudy. Highs around -2, and then tonight you drop to around -12. In the Interlake region, we're seeing Gimli around -16, and the surrounding areas also seeing similar temperatures with breezy conditions this morning. It feels like -29 with the wind chill factored in. The highs will be around -8, and then tonight it drops even further. In the Palm Flim Flam, we're seeing temperatures around -9, drifting snow being experienced there. Highs of -1 today, though the wind chill is going to feel colder than that, especially this morning. It feels like -8. Up in Thompson, -14, drifting snow also being felt, being spotted here and there. The high will get to -10, and further north in Churchill, we're looking at temperatures around -21 with snow and wind chills, making it feel like -37 this morning. And for tonight, we'll see the temperatures drop even further with snow tapering off in Churchill. So across board, it's a cold day in Winnipeg. We're going to see frigid conditions in the northern part of the province.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
We do have some issues in traffic this morning. May McKillop is in to tell us about it.
Yeah, we're looking at the North Perimeter, westbound North Perimeter. It's down to one lane approaching Pipeline Road, and I actually just got off the phone with someone who drove through that. He said it's about 2 kilometers east of Pipeline Road, and he advised anyone who's wanting to avoid it to hop off on McPhillips if you can. Anything else you're seeing out there, give us a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, May. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for being with us here on the show, Information Radio, this morning. I want to mention that we will have more on today's top story about the death in the emergency department at HSC. As you've been hearing in the news, a patient died there yesterday morning. We will talk to a patient advocate coming up this half hour on the program, so stay tuned for that. Right now to something much lighter. It's a building block of language, learning the alphabet. It's the first step to learning how to read and write. And many of us are familiar with the alphabet song and its rhythm. However, some kindergarten kids at a Winnipeg elementary school have been learning their letters through a new version of the classic ABC song.
So I'm Miss Wozni. This is my kindergarten class at West Grove School in Pembina Trail School Division. G says g, G says g, g, g. H says ha, ha, ha. Are you guys ready to sing the alphabet song? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So the new version that we use, it has a little gap between the N and the O. So instead of LMNOP super quickly, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q. We just split it up so it's L, M, N, O, P, Q, and it keeps the tune of the original song. Now I never will forget how to sing the alphabet. How to sing the alphabet. Letter recognition, so being able to name the letters. And then our ultimate goal is not only for them to recognize, oh, that's a G, but the G says g, 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 and that's going to help them learn how to read, how to write.
Sing the new alphabet song with me.
I saw it on Instagram. I'm fairly certain that's where I saw it. I follow. Okay, good job, my friends. And I just thought that that might be something that would really help my students, especially we've been seeing kids coming into kindergarten with less and less exposure from home or from daycare, especially post-COVID when a lot of families were stuck at home. And then we've seen an increase in language processing disorders and delays. Here we go. A, B, C. But then the students who are struggling a little bit more, or our English language learners who it's not their first language, it just kind of helps them have a little bit of an easier time figuring out the names of all the English letters. O, P, Q, R, S, T. It's the same melody, it's the same song, so even if we sing it this way at school, a lot of the kids might even go home and sing it the original way, and it doesn't really make a difference, I think, if they can recognize all the letters. There's nothing wrong with singing the original, and then parents can still engage with them. The parents still know what they can sing along. It's just kind of a tool that I use in the room to help our students that need that little bit of extra time. Now I struggle a little bit more to sing the old version. I'm definitely more used to the new one now, so I was trying to think in my head as I sang the old one how it goes. Do you want to try it again and we'll sing the old part at the end? Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me? Good job, sweetheart. That was so good.
That would take some getting used to for those of us that are used to the old version, but interesting hearing from the kids and the teacher. That was West Grove school teacher Christine Wozni-Clausen, along with her kindergarten class. And thanks to CBC Manitoba's community reporter, Shanley Vidal, for bringing us the story.
The cold of winter melted by an array of floral artistry to warm your soul. Fleur de Ville Artiste comes to the Leaf at Assiniboine Park January 16th to 26th. Bedazzled by figurines decorated in flowery fashions, designed by Manitoba's vibrant art scene and blossoming floral talent. Fleur de Ville Artiste, proudly sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
Time right now is 7:44 a.m. Temperature in Winnipeg -15, Brandon -11, and Thompson -14. All of us have pretty mild daytime highs, a -8 in Winnipeg, for example, but the wind chill is going to make it feel a lot colder than that, so be careful. Coming up after 8 o'clock on the program, we did not leave our series about Canada's low fertility rate in 2024. We're continuing it in this new year. Canada's birth rate is at its lowest it's ever been, in fact. But after 8, we're going to hear about a study that says religious women are having a lot more children than non-religious women. We'll talk to an expert about why those numbers are so different, and we'll obviously look at the stats as well. So that's coming up after 8 o'clock right here on Information Radio. Right now, a little bit of music from Ruby McKinnon, who is a Montreal-based singer-songwriter that performs under the name Flowerface. This is her tune, Cat's Cradle.
I've been collecting all your pictures. I've been dressing in your clothes. I've been translating all our planets. You send me messages in code. I think I've seen you in the movies. So tall up on that screen. Your tears are silver light and plastic. It doesn't mean a thing to me. I spend my days dreaming about you, 'cause you're so cool.
Tune's called Cat's Cradle. This is Flowerface on CBC. 13 minutes to 8 o'clock. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're listening on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube this morning. You might be watching. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, next, let's get to what's been top news in the city today. The Health Sciences Centre is investigating after a man died in the hospital's emergency room yesterday morning. We still don't know a lot about the events that led to the man's death, but what we do know is this. The middle-aged man arrived at the emergency room shortly after midnight on Tuesday. Upon arrival, he was assessed as low acuity. Just before 8 a.m., staff noticed his condition and had significantly worsened. He was taken to a resuscitation room, and shortly after, he was declared dead. At a news conference yesterday, HSC Chief Operating Officer Dr. Sean Young told reporters at one point that morning there were around 100 people waiting in the ER, which is more than usual. Here's more of what Dr. Young had to say about low acuity wait times.
Those waits can be quite long. When we look at those patients that wait the longest, those 90th percentiles, they can be out 10 hours and longer, and this patient would have fit that. We did have a number of high acuity patients at that time. Our resus beds were all full at that time as well. We also had a number of patients in the emergency department. When we see cold weather like this, we do have a number of patients that come in seeking shelter and safety as well, and that was a factor in the waiting room as well.
My next guest joins us via Zoom. Laura Tamblin-Watts is CEO of CanAge, an organization that advocates for the rights and well-being of aging Canadians. But she's also a patient safety and patient rights advocate. She often speaks with Canadians about their ER experiences. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
What were you thinking as you were just listening to that clip?
You almost just put your head in your hands. We had this almost happen precisely 16 years ago. We have deaths in ER that are preventable deaths. What we know is that you go to a hospital in order to get care and attention. What we also know is that's not the case anymore. What you're doing, you go to the ER, is you hope someone pays attention to you. And in this case, that lack of attention had a fatal consequence.
So when you say 16 years ago, you're talking about the incident in the same hospital, Brian Sinclair, who died after waiting for 34 hours. The lawyer actually is in the news this morning for the family of Brian Sinclair. He's saying that yesterday's death is a tragedy, but he's also saying that the recommendations that came out of his death, he feels that this should never have happened, is what he said. How surprising is the news? Like, what is your sense, at least, of how common it is to have a death in the ER department?
We have critical incidents that get reported, and that's where we know something has gone wrong in an ER. We do get them upon occasion. Certainly people go to the ER who may not survive. If you've been in a car accident and you're in a very critical condition, that kind of death is one that falls into a different category. It's very dangerous when they come in and you may or may not make it. That's not the kind of death we're talking about now. We're talking about people with low acuity. Maybe they have an infection. They're not feeling well. Something isn't as urgent as bleeding or a critical type of incident. Those deaths are quite different. And we do see them happening more and more because people are waiting for so long and people are not getting checked in on. 16 years ago, 13 years ago, 15 years ago, last year, we're getting more and more of these types of reviews saying, oh, we have to do a better job checking in on people. And yet we don't see that really transforming and happening. And that lack of checking in often is one of the core issues that leads to people dying in the ER unnecessarily.
It's interesting you're talking about checking in only because, there are not all direct similarities. I want to be clear here to what happened. We're still gathering details, but also to Brian Sinclair's case, there are some differences here. But that idea of monitoring out of Sinclair's death, Mr. Sinclair's death, that idea of monitoring patients while they are waiting for a length of time was certainly one of the big recommendations that was made. Can we clarify here what low acuity means? What exactly does that mean?
When you're coming into the ER, you're being assessed on a triage-based system, and that makes sense to people. If you have somebody who is critical, they're literally having an organ in distress, they're bleeding, that would be, of course, a very high acuity. It needs to be addressed immediately. Somebody who's considered low acuity is somebody that doesn't have something that's really at the top of the ER. So this is somebody who can afford to wait a bit. Afford to wait a bit, however, for Canadians doesn't necessarily translate in their minds to waiting between sort of 9 or 34 hours. Waiting a bit should mean that they get checked in on or directed in a different path. In this case, what we know is that a person with low acuity is sometimes kind of set to rot on the side of a waiting room and are not being monitored and checked in on. That then becomes its own problem.
And the monitoring, I guess, is critical because something something suddenly could happen. So, you could imagine that something could be missed. Obviously, even with monitoring, something could be missed. I would argue, However, the monitoring becomes critical because the chances, I guess, of it being missed are lower.
That's exactly right. In many cases with our modern technology these days, we could be doing monitoring remotely much more effectively. And we have some ERs around the world that are doing this. You shouldn't have better monitoring waiting for your table at a restaurant than you have waiting for a bed in the ER. And yet that is actually what happens. You actually have more monitoring with your Apple Watch or your iPhone in many cases than you get waiting in a waiting room. And that's because we're not using technologies to really make sure that that person's acuity is staying stable or whether it's changing. So if you actually had somebody with some types of heart monitoring device on, some type of other kind of breathing monitoring device on, even as, again, our basic iPhones or watches could be doing a better job than one overstressed, overworked nurse in the corner trying to manage the patient flow. We really need to be thinking about how technology can be used more effectively to support patients' well-being.
Did you just say that in some places in the world they are using more of that tech to monitor patients given, or maybe it's not because of this, but obviously in Canada's case and in Manitoba's case, it will be given the shortage of healthcare workers. Are they using Apple Watches then, or just your example, or what are they using to monitor patients?
There's actually particular ER departments that are using Apple Watches. And in Canada, there's actually a research out of Toronto that's looking at the connection between using Apple Watches and heart conditions and heart monitoring. So these are everyday pieces of technology that people actually routinely carry. I'm not saying everybody has them all the time, but they're easily used that can help people understand how their own well-being is occurring. We've been thinking about how to connect those with making sure that people are using those technologies and feeding them into some type of a central review system at the triage station. So that way, you know, if somebody is having an attack in the waiting room and you can see that their blood levels are spiking, or you can see that their blood pressures are spiking, you can actually have some alarm bells go off, and you don't need to rely on that person to self-identify, often after hours of waiting.
What questions, obviously, I keep reiterating that we don't have much more detail about what specifically happened yesterday morning. So, but we've reported what we know. But what questions does the incident raise for you?
We know that when people go to seek health care, that there are many barriers that they face. Linguistic barriers. We know that they base a fear in many cases of their own health well-being or the healthcare system. And we know that being an Indigenous person is one of those particular issues that can often lead to poor health. We've certainly seen that in this province before. My first question was, what is the background of this person? And were they either overtly or in some cases, covertly being discriminated against? Are they just assuming?
And I just want to interject here, because in the case of Brian Sinclair, that investigation and report clearly did talk about racism in the system and discrimination in the system. And we do not know the identity of the patient this week. So your question is to understand who the patient was. Could that have played a role? Yeah. What other questions, Laura?
I want to know what happened at the triage system. So was he being correctly diagnosed? How often did he get checked in on? Were there opportunities that were missed for staff to come and make sure that he is doing okay? And what changed over the course of that long wait time that led from a low acuity, we're concerned, but we're not critically concerned, to somebody dying in the very place that they go to get help?
Just last, how often do you hear emergency room stories in your work as a patient advocate?
Every single day, almost every hour. And what's interesting, what has changed in the last, say, 5 years, is the number of people who say, I can't even be bothered to go to the ER. I'd rather be ignored at home than be ignored in a hospital. And that means people are giving up on their healthcare system.
Thank you very much for being with us this morning. Obviously, we'll have ongoing coverage of this. We appreciate your perspective.
Thank you.
That is Laura Tamblin-Watts, CEO of CanAge, but she's a patient safety and patient rights advocate. If you have not yet read the story about what happened, you can go to our website. Obviously, we have headlines coming up right now as well. It's 3 minutes to 8, and Heather joins us.
Good morning. Yes, we'll have the latest on that story. A top official at the Health Sciences Centre saying investigators are looking into the death of a middle-aged man in the emergency room early yesterday. Dr. Sean Young says the patient arrived by ambulance and was assessed as low acuity, but after 8 hours, his condition worsened, and by the time he was taken to a resuscitation bed, he had no pulse. So we'll hear more on that. And a Winnipeg City Councillor worries about the number of vacant building fires in the inner city. Ross Eady represents people living in Minarski, which includes North Point Douglas. The vacant Holy Ascension Greek Orthodox Church on Euclid was damaged by fire Monday night, the fourth time in a little more than 3 years. There were 182 fires in vacant buildings between January and September last year. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Coming up, a study from a think tank in Ontario shows that for religious women, fertility rates are a bit higher than the national average. And some of the reasons why might surprise you. We're going to look into those as our series, looking at overall Canada's declining birth rate continues. So that's after 8. Right now, mostly cloudy, -15, the high -8, and it'll fill with wind chill like -28. And westbound North Perimeter still, we understand, down to 1 lane approaching Pipeline Road.
On Cue.
I'm Talia Schlanger sitting in for Tom Power. Something big happens to an artist's life when their music is featured in an Apple commercial. The duo Sophie Tucker will tell you what it's like having over 1 billion people hear their song. Plus, you'll hear music from their new record, Bread.
Cue, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Undocumented migrants are at the center of political controversy in the United States, but hundreds of thousands of people are undocumented in Canada as well, and advocates say they should get citizenship rights. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Liberal MPs are gathering today in Ottawa with one objective in mind, finding a new leader.
Do you have a favorite candidate in mind?
People haven't even declared yet.
So I do have a favorite person, but I let them come out and declare first.
I think that Christopher Phelan would be an amazing candidate for a new leader. People like Christy Clark from BC and others, I think could really rebuild the party.
Rebuilding the party will be a heavy lift, but there are multiple people expected to bid on the job. Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, what are the factors people might consider if they want to enter this race?
Well, let's start with the ministers who are shouldering a big load right now. Think of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc or Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly. If Canada finds itself in a tariff war in 2 weeks' time, these are the ministers leading the departments at the heart of that fight. Can you do that while also mounting a national leadership campaign? Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne, who's also deeply engaged in cross-border conversations right now, admitted on Power and Politics yesterday that he's grappling with this.
Priority number one is protecting Canada. Right. The second thing is the Liberal Party of Canada in the leadership race. And thirdly is, where am I going to be in all that?
Does the Liberal Party need to put a new voice in front of voters, someone that doesn't carry baggage from the government's time in office? Or, given the urgent timelines here, will it be more important to pick a leader that's already got a seat in the House, that can lead from day one? Because they can't have both, nor can they afford a bitter or divisive leadership race when they're at historic lows in the polls. Liberal Party spokesperson Parker Lund told CBC News yesterday that the National Board of the Liberal Party is having formal and informal meetings all this week. Establishing the rules for the leadership race, though, apparently is going to take some time. For a contest that may need to play out over a few weeks, not months, what they decide on entry fees, fundraising rules, recruiting deadlines, voting procedures may determine who's really in a position to mount a serious campaign.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. Donald Trump is once again musing about possibly acquiring Canada when he re-enters the White House.
Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line.
The U.S. president-elect says he will consider using economic force to make Canada the 51st state. Trump has made similar statements about Greenland and the Panama Canal. Let's bring in Richard Madden from Washington. And Richard, what is the latest reaction to Trump's comments?
Yeah, there's been plenty. Some questioning if he's teasing or if he's serious. But leaders of Panama, Denmark, and of course Canada are all pushing back on Trump's proposed land grab. In fact, last night, Ontario Premier Doug Ford went on one of Trump's favorite channels, Fox News, and made the case. Take a listen.
I get it. President-elect Trump is a real estate tycoon. He's made billions. But that property's not for sale. As simple as that.
Now, for weeks, Trump has been trolling Canada by calling it the 51st state, calling Prime Minister Justin Trudeau governor, and has been posting memes showing a map of the U.S. enveloping Canada. So I suspect we're going to hear a lot more saber rattling from Trump in the weeks ahead.
And what are U.S. lawmakers saying about Trump's vision?
Yeah, lawmakers are pointing out that both Canada and Denmark, that owns Greenland, are part of NATO. So Trump's unlikely annexation of these countries would invoke Article 5, which would require the U.S. to basically fight against themselves. It's an implausible situation. Democratic Congressman Jim Hines of Connecticut says it's just not going to happen.
What we're talking about here are things that are never going to happen. They're shiny things. They're little bits of tin foil and fireworks designed to distract us from the fact that the president-elect is going to completely fail to deliver.
Now, other lawmakers believe this is a legacy issue for Trump. Expanding America's territory would be historic for any president. So we'll see how far Trump goes with this. He hasn't even been sworn in yet, but he's once again captured attention around the world.
All right, thank you, Richard.
You bet.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Winds whip up the flames in Pasadena, California. 3 major wildfires are burning in the Los Angeles area, and the Santa Ana winds are making it impossible for firefighters to get the flames under control. Thousands of people have been forced to leave their communities, some at a moment's notice. This man works at a seniors facility in Pasadena where residents had to be carried to safety.
It's tough. It's tough. They can't get up. They're stuck on the wheelchairs. We got to lift them up, put them in the vans, and then take the wheelchairs at the same time. So we got to get everybody out of here.
Another fire is burning through the Pacific Palisades area. It is home to several celebrities. CATL is the world's biggest battery maker. It's based in China, and now the Pentagon has put it on its list of companies linked to the Chinese military. As Lisa Shing reports, tension is rising over technology and trade between China and the U.S.
This can, of course, be seen as a bit of an escalation.
Matt Geraci with DC-based think tank Atlantic Council says it's another wrinkle in U.S.-China relations. The U.S. Department of Defense adding Chinese tech giant Tencent and the world's largest battery maker, CATL, to a list of companies it says work with China's military.
The designation, of course, also illustrates the complexities of a push to more broadly decouple the United States from China.
Both Tencent and CATL call the move a mistake, coming at a time when relations are increasingly strained, as incoming U.S. President Donald Trump threatens to levy 60% tariffs on all imports from China, and as they are embroiled in a tech rivalry in the electric vehicle industry. China firmly opposes the U.S. creating discriminatory lists under various pretexts, said Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun. The designation could affect U.S. firms working with these companies. CATL currently supplies batteries to car makers including Tesla, and it's working with Ford on making those batteries at a plant in Michigan.
This action may give a company like Ford a bit more pause on how or whether to proceed with its budding partnership.
Geraci says while this action primarily risks a company's reputation, it could open the door to an outright ban. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Chigi, Cecilia Sala sta rientrando in Italia.
Italian TV commentators are celebrating the news. Journalist Cecilia Sala is on her way back home after 3 weeks in an Iranian prison. The 29-year-old reporter was detained in Tehran on December 19th, just 3 days after Italian police arrested an Iranian engineer on a U.S. warrant. It was suggested that Sala was being held as a bargaining chip to ensure the engineer's release. Italian officials say Sala's freedom required intensive diplomatic effort. Starting this year, Canada is cutting the number of new permanent residents. The initial target was to admit 500,000 people in 2025, in part to help the labor shortages. But in a survey conducted by CBC, nearly 2/5 of respondents say they are not working in their field of expertise. Vanessa Lee has been looking at the struggles of internationally trained doctors.
I was practicing in the Dominican Republic for 3 years.
Like other international medical graduates, Ismenda Ramirez has spent thousands of dollars to write and pass Canadian medical exams. But for 2 years, she has been waiting for a residency. a crucial stage where doctors gain hands-on experience in hospitals and clinics. During this time, she has worked at McDonald's and is currently a medical assistant.
We are willing to work hard and to do what it takes just to get to our final goal.
Advocates say more funding and residency spots are needed. The vast majority of placements go to graduates from Canadian medical schools. Last year, just over 670 international medical graduates were successful, but about 930 didn't get a position. Stephanie Price is with the Federation of Medical Regulatory Authorities of Canada.
In order to put more people into a residency program, you have to have more people there to be the mentors. And so I think that is a significant bottleneck.
The path to becoming a doctor in Canada is not simple. Not only can qualifications vary depending on country of origin, all 13 provinces and territories have separate licensing requirements. Dr. Joss Reimer.
And even me as the president of the Canadian Medical Association, I find it challenging to understand what the different options are and how they work.
Roughly 6.5 million Canadians don't have a family doctor. Across the country, there are thousands of internationally trained physicians who could bring down that number, but aren't able to work in their field. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Toronto.
You can read more about the survey and our methodology at cbcnews.ca/Welcome to Canada. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, everyone. How's your Wednesday going so far? It's minus 15 in the city of Winnipeg. We're going to get into your forecast in a moment. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC Live in downtown Winnipeg. You're with the morning show, Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Well, this half hour on the program, Canada's birth rate is at the lowest it has ever been. We've been doing a series about this. We've talked to people about their choices to go child-free. We've also talked about a number of different things that are happening when people are making those decisions. But today, we're going to look at something that is running counter to the trend of the lower birth rate in this country. One study says religious women are having a lot more children than non-religious women. And in fact, the rates of birth rate among religious women in Canada is higher than the national average. So we're going to look at those numbers, and we're going to hear a little bit more about the study from the study author about why those numbers are as they are. So stay tuned. We'll have that conversation. Right now, though, back to today's top story in our community, which is around healthcare. Heather Wells is in with our headlines.
Well, investigators at the Health Sciences Centre are combing over notes and video surveillance to determine why a middle-aged man died in the emergency room early yesterday. He had arrived by ambulance and was assessed as low acuity. After 8 hours, staff noticed he had worsened. They rushed him to a resuscitation bed, and the hospital's chief operating officer says that is when the patient had no pulse. And Dr. Sean Young says congestion in the ER was an issue. The lawyer for the family of Brian Sinclair says this latest death should never have happened. Sinclair was an Indigenous man who died in the HSC ER 16 years ago. Sinclair had waited 34 hours. We're going to hear more about that, as well as other Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
It is 12 minutes after 8 right now. Abby's in with a full look at our day and what the weather's going to bring. Hi.
Cloudy and cold conditions down south, and if you go further north, you're going to see snow in Churchill this morning. For Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, we're looking at mostly cloudy conditions. Temperatures in Winnipeg at this time around minus 16. This cloudy skies will be sticking around with light breeze coming from the south today. We will reach a high of minus 8 today, but the wind chill is going to be something you need to take into consideration this morning as you start your day. Feels like minus 28 out there, and then by the afternoon period, the wind chill drops around minus 17. In western Manitoba, we're looking at cloudy conditions in Brandon also, minus temperatures around minus 12, the Parkland region around minus 16, and if we go up north, we're seeing colder temperatures with that drifting snow being spotted up north in Churchill, which remains frigid at minus 21. So across board, the wind chill is just something that's going to make things feel cold this morning. Plus, that cloudy day will be seen and light snow in some areas. But for Winnipeg right now, we are at minus 15. We've been there for most of the morning, and we're seeing cloudy skies out there. We get to a high of minus 8.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
May McKillop in for Corey with our commute details. Hello again.
Hello. We've been reporting at about North Perimeter, westbound North Perimeter. It's down to one lane approaching Pipeline. There's emergency crews on site about 2 kilometers before Pipeline. If anyone's in the area and wants to give us an update, I'd love to hear what's happening there currently. As well, we're just looking at some highways outside of the city, particularly in the western side of the province on Highway number 1 out of Brandon and looking north up along Highway number 10 into Riding Mountain region. We're seeing some partly covered and drifting snow on the streets. Anything else happening out there, please give me a call. We have about half an hour before the next traffic hit. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, we carried over our series about the declining fertility rate in this country into this new year. Our next interview looks at the stats that run counter to the trend of the lower birth rate. In 2023, a think tank based in Ontario released a study about what fertility rates are like for religious women. Cardis and Angus Reid surveyed 2,700 Canadian women aged 18 to 44 in 2022. They found that religious women tend to have more kids than non-religious women. Lyman Stone is the author of the study and a senior fellow at Cardis, which is a nonpartisan Christian think tank in Hamilton, Ontario, and he walked me through the story.
Good morning. It's good to be with you.
So what did you find? How much higher is the fertility rate among religious women, according to your study?
So obviously, it's going to depend a bit on exactly how you measure religion, whether you talk about it by just affiliation or attendance or whatever. But in general, religious women have anywhere from 0.3 to 0.6 more children on average than less or non-religious women.
Why did you want to look into this, into how religion impacts fertility rates specifically?
Well, fertility is falling in a lot of countries around the world, including Canada. And we're also seeing major cultural changes with changing religious beliefs, shifts in the kind of religion that people practice, whether they practice religion at all. And we wanted to see how those are related. We wanted to see if changing fertility dynamics might be closely tied to changing social values about religion and faith. And we found that, in fact, they are closely tied, that even in a modern, industrial, educated, egalitarian society like Canada, it is nonetheless still the case that religious women want more kids and have more kids.
What specific religious groups did you survey?
So we tried to get a diverse cross-section of Canadians. And so we captured people of all sorts of religious groups. We ended up sort of consolidating them. We've got Catholics in a group. We've got Protestants in a group. We have Jews. We have Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs. And then, of course, for non-religious people, because we also want to know the comparison there, we actually subdivided non-religious people into a couple different groups. We have people who are spiritual but not religious. So that's kind of a group that they might have some kind of spiritual or theological belief, but they don't identify with a specific historic tradition. Then we have people who are nothing in particular. They say, oh, I'm not really very spiritual, but I don't really have a name. And then we also have people who said they were atheist or agnostic. Mm-hmm. So people who are committed to, we might say, a more specific philosophy of non-religion.
Mm-hmm. I know that you've said there are differing opinions on why the numbers are different for religious to non-religious women. What are some of the things you delved into, and also what surprised you when you were looking at the reasons behind people's decision-making?
Yeah, so the one that people always think of when you talk on this topic is they say, well, maybe religious women, their husbands keep them in the kitchen and don't let them use contraceptives, and they don't have jobs. We found that is not true, that religious and non-religious Canadian women had about the same employment rates and had about the same rates of usage of contraception. So we ruled that out. So then we said, okay, so what is it? And what we found is, first of all, religious women just want more kids. They're going to be more likely to make life choices that facilitate having kids earlier so they can have more. Secondly, they tend to get married younger and to stay married longer. And finally, we found that religious women reported lower levels of anxiety and concern and worry for almost every single potential worry or anxiety or concern that we surveyed. The upshot of this is that they just had a lot less anxiety about the challenges of life.
And when you say the anxiety and concerns you surveyed, was this anxieties about bringing children into the world, into the current state of the world, or was this anxieties about being able to parent? What kinds of anxieties did you look at?
We asked so many different things. We asked people about their worries about the state of the world, about politics, about the economy, about overpopulation, about climate. We asked people about the cost of childcare, the cost of housing, their employment situation, their free time, their availability of family to help them, or their responsibilities to care for family. We asked, I want to say it was something like 40 different worries or concerns. And on every single one of them, religious women of a similar age and childbearing history were just less likely to report any concern.
You use the word support just now, and I know that you talk about something called non-market social supports when it comes to raising kids. What's meant by that, and how does it factor into our conversation?
Non-market social supports, which also demographers will also call this alloparenting, parenting by other people, basically means people who help you out without needing to be paid, right? So, you need to get one kid to a doctor's appointment. You don't want to bring the other kid. What are you going to do? You drop them off at grandma's house, or you drop them off at a friend's house, or, you drop them off at a church program, maybe. Or maybe you drop them off at a friend's house, but the friend is a friend from church. So religious people, we know, do benefit from a lot more non-market social support than non-religious people. They're just more likely to have a larger pool of friends and family and people who are willing to help them out a bit. Just right now, personal anecdote, a friend of mine from church, their car broke down right on the edge of a winter storm, and so they and their 4 kids are staying at my house right now for who knows how long. So, these are the kinds of things that tend to occur in communities that are bonded together by some kind of philosophy or ideology. And as a result, that may help religious parents, religious women, feel more confident about facing the various challenges of their life.
Feeling somehow like there's a community there that's been established, which I guess could be established also in a non-religious environment. But this is, as a matter of your study, this is a community that is built, and as you said, built around shared value, so that also could extend to when you need those supports when you're raising children.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's nothing to say that non-religious people can't build such a community.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a little bit of a roadblock, right? That ultimately building such a community really requires you to sacrifice your own well-being, right? You have to say, okay, look, I'm going to trade off some of my own welfare right now, some of my own comfort right now in the name of this community that's bigger than me, that's outside of me. And you need a compelling argument for why that community is so important. And historically, the arguments that have persuaded large groups of people tend to be religion or ethnicity.
Why for you was it important to look at how religion impacts fertility, just to revisit that?
Yeah, so we know that both religiosity and fertility are somewhat declining. We want to know how those relate. And in particular, there are times where, the government, obviously, we live in a pluralistic, diverse society. The government's not going to step in and promote religion or something. We wouldn't want that. But the government sometimes has a choice about how to handle issues of religious freedom, religious toleration, religious liberty. And it's worthwhile for policymakers to understand that when religion declines, when people are less religious, there are costs to society, right? People lose access to these non-market social supports, which make their lives more livable, right? When religion declines, you will get fewer babies, perhaps. When you have fewer babies, well, that has some challenges for pension funds or things like that. So we wanted to be able to draw the line to say, look, we're not saying, we don't want the government to come in and declare, okay, everybody's religious now, you got to go to church. Okay, no, that's not the goal here. But we want to be able to have an accounting to say, look, this transformation, it has some costs on society. It's not costless. And so that can be considered when we're thinking about issues that impinge on religious liberty and religious.
What should secular Canadians take away from the study?
I think one is to understand neighbors better, right? So religious people didn't just have more of their own babies. They also had more adopted children, more stepchildren, more foster children, and more children from IVF. So it wasn't just that they really like having their own biological genetic children. They were just more child-oriented in general. And so I think secular Canadians can understand their religious neighbors a bit better in that way. Also, they might be able to learn something. We talked a little bit about this non-market social support. That requires a community. So if you're non-religious, and you want that, then I think the question is, how do you either join or build a community where people feel motivated to provide it, where people look at that community and that group and they say, this group is so important, I want to sacrifice for it.
Thank you very much for being part of our series. Really appreciate the conversation.
My pleasure.
Lyman Stone is a senior fellow and demographer with Cardis, who specializes in fertility and family. He was part of led the study on this study we were just talking about, which showed that religious women are having more children than non-religious women in Canada. It was Cardis and Angus Reid surveying 2,700 Canadian women aged 18 to 44 in 2022. And on this series, if you have something to add that you think we should explore about fertility rates, about your own choices, if you've made choices not to have children as well, we would love to hear from you. The one thing that I have yet to really hear, and maybe that's because we're asking a really personal thing, but how much does it cost to have a kid right now? I don't have children, and I find myself thinking, I wonder how much the milk, the diapers, the groceries, on top of all the other things. But the specific costs that come with childcare, like how much does it cost you for if you do need daycare on top of things, and like what are the actual things that come into play and what do those costs look like in 2025 for a family? So if you are brave enough and bold enough to open the books, I think it would just be fascinating to sort of compare some of those numbers. But if you want to weigh in with anything on our series, 788-3205 is where you can reach us directly. That's 204-788-3205.
I'm Nala Ayed, host of Ideas. Are there better ways for us to talk to each other? And could that help us build a better society? Novelist and poet Ian Williams wants to start a conversation about conversations. The 2024 CBC Massey Lectures on Ideas. What I Mean to Say, Remaking Conversations in Our Time. Find Ideas wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Time right now is 8:26 a.m. and there's a groundbreaking new Indigenous-led comedy that's premiering on CBC this week. I saw some images from this and it looks like it's going to be beautiful, but also that it's going to be funny. It's called North of North. It features a young Inuit woman trying to restart her life. Now, CBC's Juanita Taylor went to a showing in Iqaluit and spoke to the creators, actors, and some of the people who live there. That is because the show is set and filmed there.
For people here in Iqaluit, the star-studded red carpet for a groundbreaking new comedy, North of North, is both a party and a moment of pride.
Yeah, it's a landmark in history in terms of cinematography, and it's quite the honor to live here and be here.
Hi, Siaya. The show follows a young Inuk mother fumbling her way toward a new life in a small Arctic community.
The accident made me realize I need a fresh start.
No. A world that the show's Nunavut-based creators say is built for comedy.
Making North of North a comedy was the most authentic way to tell this story. We are people that love to laugh. We laugh our way through things.
Well, I think a lot of Inuit will see the show and feel like they recognize a lot of the characters, like that could be their mother, that could be their sister.
The town is fiction, but for people here, it's relatable.
Oh my gosh, there was a lot of things that hit really close to home, but a lot of similarities, but a lot of it's in a very nice, fresh perspective, and I'm really grateful to have Inuit representation in the show.
North of North features rising star Anna Lamb from HBO's True Detective Night Country. She hopes the story of modern Inuit life will resonate around the world.
What I hope people worldwide get out of this show, I think sometimes people only understand Inuit as like a historical people. We don't exist anymore. It's like, well, no, we've always been here and we've always been so connected
to the rest of the world.
This Indigenous arts journalist also hopes it changes perceptions.
It allows us to be more fully human in the eyes of the people who view these stories. If you're only ever viewed for your trauma, you're not really seen as whole.
With no studios, it wasn't easy to film in Iqaluit, but with the first studio now under construction, ang Newcomer is optimistic about the territory's film industry.
It's a space that we wish we had access to when we were starting out, and we hope it'll be a game changer for the Nunavut film industry.
The first episode will premiere on CBC and APTN in January. The global launch for North of North will be in the spring. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Pretty cool, huh? Looks like one to watch for sure. That is, of course, a report from, as she just said, CBC's Juanita Taylor. It is 8:29. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You are with CBC's Morning Show here live in downtown Winnipeg. I want to give some thanks for a moment here to the people that specifically work on items for our morning show today. And they are Shanley Vidal, our community reporter, Chidi Kuma, associate producer, and Kalkadan Mulageta, associate producer. Coming up on The Current, you might have heard this series that we were talking about, after 7 o'clock on our show specifically, but it's been on World Report. It has to do with a new survey that commissioned by CBC News. It tells us more about what it's really like to come to Canada as a newcomer. And so I'm talking about it as a series because it's going to create a series of stories. One of them is coming up on The Current. There may be as many as 500,000 undocumented people living here in Canada. Who are they and what do they do? So it's not, pardon me, I think I've mixed up my threads here. The survey is a separate thing. We will have separate stories. This is related to a special report by Lindsay Duncombe. So who are they and what do they do? Matt Galloway presents a documentary by Lindsay Duncombe. It's called Undocumented, Canada's Ghosts. It's part of a CBC series, Welcome to Canada. Look at me. It is part of the series. And that explores the experiences of newcomers. So that is this morning right after the show. And maybe it's a good thing Matt's going to take over the airwaves because apparently I'm ready for the show to end. Sorry, guys. So that's coming up on The Current with Matt right away. Right now, though, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is -14. We're going to be watching that temperature climb. -8 is our high in Winnipeg this afternoon, continuing to climb overnight to -4 and then a -3 tomorrow before cold returns. So enjoy this day, a high of -8. A top official at the Health Sciences Centre in Winnipeg says the emergency room ran out of resuscitation beds around the time a middle-aged man died yesterday. The hospital's chief operating officer, Dr. Sean Young, says the ER has 6 resuscitation beds.
They're the most critical beds in the entire province. So when we start running out of room resuscitation in particular, that's when we start to get nervous and we start calling internal surges, whether it's surgery or medicine or sometimes other programs requiring the capacity. They'll figure out what patients can be moved.
Young says the patient arrived by ambulance shortly after midnight yesterday morning. He was assessed as low acuity. After 8 hours, staff noticed his condition had worsened. Young says by the time they got him into a resuscitation bed, the patient had no pulse. He says investigators will determine whether the death is a critical incident. This latest death is being called a tragedy that should never have happened. That from a lawyer for the family of Brian Sinclair. Sinclair was an Indigenous man who died waiting 34 hours to be seen at the HSC in 2008. Vilko Zabogar says Sinclair's legacy was to prevent similar deaths.
The point that the Sinclair family wanted to make is that what happened to him could happen to anybody. He was just maybe more susceptible to being ignored, but the same problems affect everybody.
An inquest was called. Several protocols were put in place as a result. Zabogar believes discrimination was a factor in Sinclair's death, and more facts are needed to determine if that was a factor in this latest death. There have been at least 4 deaths of people waiting in a Winnipeg emergency department in 2 years. A Winnipeg man who recently was rushed to hospital says he feels for the family of the patient who died waiting at the Health Sciences Centre. Jeff Willison says hearing about the man's death yesterday shocked him. The 57-year-old says it could have been him. Willison says when he arrived by ambulance at St. Boniface Hospital on Friday, he waited hours on a stretcher in the ER.
It literally looked like a war zone. There had to be a minimum of 3 other EMS teams in front of me waiting to check in. It was like looking at people in a Costco line trying to get out of Costco. There was a lady who looked like it was my grandmother crying for help.
After spending even more hours in the waiting room, Willison decided to go home without seeing a doctor. He worries patients depending on care in the ER are not being triaged properly and are waiting too long for the right bed to open up. You can read more on these stories on our website this morning, cbc.ca/Manitoba. A man missing, last seen in Winnipeg's Elmwood area, has now been found dead. 36-year-old Davis Hickaway was reported missing December 19th. Winnipeg police this morning confirm his death. They did not provide further details. Earlier, police had said Hickaway's vehicle had been found east of Winnipeg in the RM of Reynolds. The cost of insuring a car in Manitoba is about to go up an average of $51 a year. The Public Utilities Board has ordered Manitoba Public Insurance to raise its basic rates by 5.7%. MPI wanted a 3% hike, even though it needed a hike more than double that to cover costs. Matt Wiebe, the NDP minister responsible for MPI, suggests his government gave the Crown Corporation's board direction to seek a lower rate hike.
We respect the work of the PUB. We respect the decision that they've made, but it shows that there's more work that we need to do to get the corporation on track and continue to focus on affordability to keep car insurance cheap for Manitobans.
The Public Utilities Board says a lower hike now would lead to higher hikes later. A patient who underwent a medical procedure at St. Boniface Hospital says the experience caused her excruciating pain. The patient went to the hospital's emergency department in late 2022 because of a painful cyst. She was treated with intravenous fentanyl and a local anesthetic, but the patient says it didn't work and she could feel everything during the procedure. She is now suing St. Boniface Hospital and 2 staff members. The lawsuit says the patient was screaming out in pain and crying throughout the procedure. The hospital has not yet filed a statement of defense. None of the allegations have been proven in court. A Winnipeg City Councillor worries about the number of vacant building fires in the inner city. Ross Eady represents people living in the Mynarski ward. That includes North Point Douglas. The vacant Holy Ascension Greek Orthodox Church on Euclid was damaged by fire Monday night for the 4th time in as little more than 3 years. Edie says it's both sad and stressful.
I feel for the congregation there, but we have businesses that are getting burnt out. We have homes, apartment blocks. It's out of hand.
There were 182 fires in vacant buildings between January and September last year. That is more than any other year since 2018. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby, better get into a last look at the forecast.
Yeah, we're looking at another cold there in the province today. Temperatures ranging from -28 up north to -16 in the southern part of the province. Though the wind chill is something you need to take into consideration. So across board, it's a chilly day, it's a colder day, but tomorrow we get to see -4 in the city, so we should enjoy it.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to that, and hopefully the wind chill won't ruin the party. Still happening, westbound North Perimeter down to 1 lane approaching Pipeline Road as we get off the air here with you, and thank you for listening. On behalf of our live team in our news center, Joni Nicolo, Megan Ketchison, and Heather Wells, as well as May McKillop, Abby Adeyemi, Kevin Nipatebo, and myself, and on behalf of our producers, the show producer in Current Affairs, Nellie Gonzalez, and the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba, Leif Larson, thank you for listening. Take care, be well, stay safe. Talk to you tomorrow.